Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications so you will not miss a future video.
Welcome to the channel, The Tech Piano Player Kid.
A black background with white text that reads The Tech Piano Player Kid displays on the screen with the same text written to the right in Braille. What is up, everyone? The Tech Piano Player Kid here, and today we're continuing on Timecrest 3, Chapter 12, and we left off where Luthor was heading towards King Jenna's castle and for the trials, I believe. And we also had some interesting experiences with Riley, and it seems like that Riley was not saying being controlled per se, but it seems like that she was being taken over by something, or there's something that she knows that she doesn't want to tell Luthor or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, chapter 11 was long. I mean, I was not expecting it to be that long. That was probably the longest Timecrest video so far. Unfortunately, there's probably more to come like this, especially this one, most likely. So, we're going to see what happens in Chapter 12, Timecrest 3, and let's do this.
Chapter 12. Messages. Description. The pocket watch clicked open inside Luthor's jacket pocket. Description. Luthor is sitting on the grass of the courtyard outside the Valdorian reception hall, in the section set up for non-Valdorians, with Model 1 floating beside him.
Okay. So it seems like they're at the castle essentially, or whatever. But in the area where non-Valdorians are meant to be.
Description. Julius and Helena are holding onto Ash while standing at one of the several refreshment tables in the distance. Description. Julius and Helena are holding onto Ash while standing at one of the several refreshment tables in the distance. Other non-Valdorian guests are circling the tables, filling their plates up with different kinds of food. Description. Julius glanced over his shoulder at Luthor. Description. Luthor tilted his head up towards the sky. Description. The light of the moon glowed intermittently behind the clouds. Description. Luthor's eyes lit up as he saw the glint of shiny metal through the gaps in the clouds. A human machine, possibly a rule breaker machine, floats above the Valdorian palace. Some human technologies that made their way into Alencia felt more powerful than any spell mages could learn. Technologies that made their way into Alencia felt more powerful than any spell mages could learn. People started referring to these special machines as rule breakers. I remember a machine that allowed anyone to change their body shapes, like lose or gain weight, get longer legs, different shaped face, those sorts of things. We call this specific body-altering machine, Rule Breaker Corpus.
Interesting.
Another rule breaker tech called Rule Breaker Genesis allowed mothers to speed up their pregnancies and growth of their child.
Okay.
These rule breaker machines are rare finds in Alencia, usually buried away. But people became rich if they could find a rule breaker and operate it. Not so long ago, Alencians felt awe when they looked at human technology. Now all they feel is fear. They've allowed Valdor to seize all the rule breakers and lock them away in this palace. Except for that one out there. Description. Luthor smiled a little as he said. Music player.
Whoops.
Except for that one out there. I found out from Riley that Valdorians don't know what it is or how to move it. And they are unwilling to move their palace from underneath it out of fear of looking fearful. Description. Luthor continued to look up at the sky. The Valdorians claim it's a rule breaker, so no one is allowed near it. They gave it the name Rule Breaker Nemesis to make it sound evil.
Well.
I hope it is a rule breaker. There's a good chance it is. Valdorians have definitely tried to destroy it and found it indestructible like other rule breakers. Description. Luthor eyed the surface of his jacket where the pocket watch is hidden behind. If you're there and wondering why I opened the pocket watch when I'm surrounded by Valdorians, I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay.
Description. Luthor sighed and smiled. I just had to. Description. Luthor paused again. Are you there? System message.
Sure.
Back.
But
Button.
before I do that,
Settings.
I'm gonna
Button. Settings.
save this.
To sign. Game center icon. Load the tech. Load get the tech piano player kid. Game center. Load save game. Button. Save game. Save. Button.
Boop.
Alert. Okay. Button.
Boop.
Okay. Music volume 10%.
Go back.
Buffer. Continue. What other rule breakers would you say? What? I'm here, Luthor. I'm happy you opened up the pocket watch so we could talk again. What happened on the train ride here? Did you tell your parents everything that happened with the Robertses and Pitora? 1 of 3 response. What other? Would you say Rule Breaker Nemesis is a satellite? 3 of 3 responses. Button.
Interesting.
I'm here, Luthor. I'm happy.
But over here.
Luthor. I'm happy you opened up the description. I appreciate that you're still here. My parents are angry with me and they are concerned I'm speaking with a stranger on my pocket watch.
Of course they are.
I told them that I got angry at the Robertses for easily accepting their lives as prisoners. Description: Luthor looked at his hands. But I didn't mention anything about the water balloon. And I didn't say anything about Pitora. Mom and Dad would never leave me alone if I told them Pitora could be out to kill me. Description: A loud explosion sounded. Luthor looked behind him to see a Valdorian launching continuous fire attacks at a large apple tree that grew in the middle of the courtyard. Description: Luthor shifted himself on the grass to face the apple tree and the line of Valdorians filing into the courtyard, all dressed in formal red attire. Description: Valdorians took turns nicking the apple tree with a knife, hacking at it with a sword, or shooting attack magic at it as they passed by.
Why?
Description: None of the attacks left any mark on the tree. Description: After each Valdorian attacked, they raised their hands to the tree, showing off the Valdorian tattoo on their wrist and saying loudly, "Praise the first." Description: Luthor shook his head as he watched this. First Mage Ezra supposedly planted this apple tree. I'm beginning to think the First Mage has a fondness for apples. We saw an apple tree on Unity 2. The Valdorians believe that the First Mage left this tree to show how invincible Valdorians are. Valdorians are descendants of First Mage Ezra and get to live much longer than the rest of us. They attack this tree as a way to remind themselves of their extraordinary heritage. Description: Model 1 said, "Did the Time Manipulator ask you about the apple tree and the rule breaker machine, Luthor?" "No." Description: Model 1 said, "Interesting. I rarely see you talking out loud and explaining things without any prompt, Luthor. Are you the person?" Description: Model 1 said, "Interesting. I rarely see you talking out loud and explaining things without any prompt, Luthor. Are you hoping to make the Time Manipulator feel included?" "The person I'm speaking to now is not the Time Manipulator." Description: Model 1 said, "Then your actions are even more surprising to me." Description: Model 1 said, "Are you hoping that this person will lead you to the Time Manipulator?" "Yeah, something like that." Description: Model 1 beeped and showed a digital smile. Description: Model 1 said, "I like seeing you happy and you seem happy when you are speaking to the watch." Description: Luthor smiled a little. Description: But when he glanced at Model 1, his expression saddened. Description: Model 1 said, "You look sad now. I'm sorry, Luthor, that I remind you of Lieutenant Zone Valsalry." Description: A voice said, "You know my dad's name?" Description: Luthor's eyes widened as he looked behind him and saw a young girl with large, bright eyes. Description: The girl looked curiously at Model 1 and said, "What are you supposed to be? You don't look like me. You're smooth and shiny. Did you fall from that thing in the sky? And how do you know my dad's name?" Description: Luthor swallowed hard and is speechless. Description: Model 1 floated in between Luthor and the girl and said, "You are not allowed in this area. Go away. We met your dad before. That's how we know Lieutenant Zone Valsalry." Description: Model 1 paused and stopped driving Zoe away from Luthor. Description: The girl turned to Luthor and nodded her head. She said, "Oh, I'm Zoe. I'm named after my dad." Description: Zoe continued to inspect Luthor with her large eyes before she said, "You're pretty. What's your name?" Luthor. Description: Zoe smiled before she lowered her gaze and said, "Luthor, my mom said I'm not supposed to talk about my dad since he's gone. She says it's against the rules to feel sad for a long time after someone dies."
Why? There we go. Try to just adjust my headphones.
Description: Zoe kicked the grass and said, "I hate that rule. Maybe it's easier for my mom to forget because she's not named after him, but I'm named after my dad. Every time I tell people my name, I think about him. I remember your dad, Zoe. I still feel sad that he's gone." Description: Zoe was silent as she observed Luthor. She said, "How tall are you, Luthor?" Description: Luthor blinked, but after a moment, he stood up. Description: Zoe crossed her arms and seemed to be considering something. After a while she nodded her head and said, "I'm going to date you when I grow taller, Luthor, so you don't have to bend down to kiss me. It'll look too weird now since I'm so much shorter than you."
Wait, isn't this the Zoe that he talked about that she was 5? If this is the 5-year-old that he was talking about, wow. Okay.
Description: Luthor blinked again. Description: Zoe looked at Model 1 and said, "Sorry, shiny round thing, but I like legs and tall and pretty boys and not things that tell me to go away."
Okay. That was so random, but okay. Okay.
Description: She looked back at Luthor and said, "Don't forget about my dad, Luthor. I want to talk about him when we're boyfriend and girlfriend. And don't tell my mom, it'll be our secret." Description: Luthor's expression softened. "I promise. I'll never forget your dad, Zoe." Description: Zoe beamed with happiness. She said, "Good. Luthor, I want to tell you a secret already. I think about my dad a lot, even when I'm not saying my name." Description, a woman called out, Zoe, there you are, come back here, right now, you're not supposed to be in that area. Description, Zoe said, oh, that's my mom. I have to go. Zoe, ellipsis, I'm really sorry about your dad. Description, Zoe shook her head and said, don't be silly. You're like the only person I know besides me who remembers him. My dad was so lucky to meet you. Bye, Luthor, I'll see you when I grow taller. Description, Zoe waved goodbye and ran back towards her mother, who was gathered with the other Valdorians. Description, Luthor dropped back down to a sitting position on the grass. He hugged his knees and buried his face. Description, Model 1 said, I'm sorry, Luthor. I walked away that night, Model 1. Description, Model 1 said, I'm sorry for misinterpreting your desire, Luthor. You worked so hard to find ways to test your formula safely, but each failure took a toll on you. Description, Model 1 said, and then I saw you, the night before Dr. Brayfulger came to collect the lieutenant from us. I saw you standing outside of the operation room holding the cure. You stood there the whole night. At one point, you even put your hand on the door and opened it. I walked away that night. Description, Luthor looked around the courtyard. Valdorian guards stood straight like prison bars around the premises of the non-Valdorian section, but none of them looked in Luthor's direction.
Well.
Description, Model 1 said, I made a mistake, Luthor. Friends are supposed to make each other happy. You are my friend and I just wanted to make you happy. Description, Luthor looked at the ground. Description, he paused for a long while. I never considered you my friend, Model 1. You are a robot. Stop thinking you know what makes me happy and just do as I say. Description, Model 1 floated quietly for a moment before saying, understood, Luthor. Is there anything you would like me to do tonight? Perhaps some music? Just stay quiet and still until we go home, Model 1. Description, Luthor looked around him. No one is near him at the moment and none of the guards are looking at him. Luthor murmured. And remember not to use your gelatinous form, no matter what. Valdorians will take you away if they know you're not just a basic model anymore. Description, Model 1 was quiet for a moment before saying, understood, Luthor. I will keep quiet and still as much as possible. Description, Luthor returned his attention to the apple
Like
tree.
we know that's gonna.
Valdorians are still hacking away at the tree.
Like we know that's gonna happen.
I wonder what First Mage Ezra would say or think if he saw his descendants hacking away at the apple tree. I can't imagine he planted this tree so people could attack it. It's common knowledge that Valdorians are the descendants of the First Mage. But Riley told me it's only known amongst the royals that First Mage Ezra was once a Valdorian king, their first king and original founder of the Valdorian Empire. I wondered what happened between the First Mage and his people. Description, Luthor paused. And I wonder what the Time Manipulator, the first human, would think of his descendants. I wonder what he would think of me. Description, Luthor took a deep breath and seemed to calm down. System message, Luthor is I appreciate you trying to include me in your world, Luthor. 1 of 4 don't you think you were a little harsh with Model 1? If you're that upset, then why not just let Valdor take Model 1? 2 of 4, are you okay, Luthor? It must be hard on you to see Lieutenant Val Selby's daughter. 3 of 4, I'm surprised Valdorians want to be anywhere near the non-Vald LinkedIn. Now, I'm surprised Valdorians want to be anywhere near the non-Valdorian section. Who are the other non-Valdorian guests? 4 of 4 responses. Button.
Okay, now I'm curious.
I'm surprised Valdorians want to be anywhere near the non-Valdorians. Responded. The non-Valdorian guests are typically people Valdor hired for their odd jobs, like mercenaries or tradesmen with specific talents the Empire needs. My family are the only guests from the human quarantine zone.
Ew.
The other non-Valdorian guests don't know we're human, but Riley told me that Janez lets his Valdorians know about our background. I am impressed that the Valdorians don't show any signs of fear of having humans around. I'm sure it's a mixture of pride and trust in Janez. Description, Luthor sighed before surveying the courtyard. I've been keeping an eye out for Riley. I messaged her that I have the batteries, but she never replied. Description, Luthor frowned.
I hope she's okay.
I don't know if I'll have the chance to see her and make sure she's okay. Non-Valdorians aren't exactly welcome to walk around the palace as we please. Especially me.
Whoa, that was weird.
I don't know if I'll have the chance to see her and make sure she's okay. Non-Valdorians aren't exactly welcome to walk around the palace as we please. Especially me.
What the heck is going on here?
Description, Luthor's eyes continued to wander around the courtyard party as he spoke. He stopped on Brayfulger.
Uh-oh.
Description, Bray held a large plate of food and a drink. The metal pieces sewn onto his cloak reflected the light of the courtyard as he walked around looking for a seat. Description, he neared a group of non-Valdorian guests sitting at a table with an extra chair. When they saw him, one person put their bag on the empty chair. Description, Bray looked at the group for a bit before he moved on. He sat down on an empty bench and started voraciously eating the food on his plate. Description, a few people from the non-Valdorian table got up to get more food. As they passed by Luthor, one of them said, "Do you know what Dr. Fulger's story is?" Description, one person replied, "Don't know his story, but he's a bumbling idiot. I've worked with him briefly. He just laughs at everything." Description,
Whoops.
one person replied, "Don't know his story, but he's a bumbling idiot. I've worked with him briefly. He just laughs at everything. Wonder why Valdor hired him as their head doctor." If he could do the job, I wager I could do it 100 times better.
Ew.
Description. Another said, well, you don't want to get sick, do you? Who better to be around sick people than a creep no one will miss? Description. Luthor glanced back at Bray. Description. He is polishing off the food on his plate at an amazing speed. Bray picked up his cup and drank from it, his eyes meeting Luthor's. Description. Luthor stiffened. Description. Bray's lips curled downward. He slammed the cup down on the bench and forcibly shoved a large bite of food into his mouth and proceeded to chew with an angry expression. Description. Luthor looked away. After a bit, Luthor took a deep breath and slowly looked back at Bray. Description. A couple of non-Valdorian guests, juggling plates of food and cups of drinks, walked near Bray. One then tumbled and spilled food and drink over Bray's cloak. Description. The two guests froze as Bray looked at the stain on his cloak. After a moment, Bray brushed off the spilt food and smiled at the two. He scooted over on the bench making room for them and motioning for them to join him. Description. One of them smiled politely and seemed to be declining Bray's invitation. Description. The other guest made a very noticeable face. Description. Bray's expression turned sour as he saw the look of rejection on the guest's face. Description. As the two guests scurried away, Bray took out a water balloon from his cloak. Description. Luthor scrambled up from the ground as Bray chucked the balloon. Levidos Melior Magnus, upstream. Description. Gusts of wind pushed the balloon upwards, but Bray pointed a finger at it and the balloon flew to the guest who made the face, hitting its target. Description. Luthor froze as he looked at the guest who got hit. For a brief moment, a wet mark appeared, but soon got absorbed into the guest who didn't seem to feel anything. Description. At one point, the two guests both glanced back at Bray and then snickered to each other before disappearing out of sight. Description. Luthor glanced around and saw a Valdorian guard who is facing Bray's direction. Luthor dashed to the guard and grabbed onto his arm. Description. Model 1 followed behind Luthor. The water balloon that Dr. Fulger just hit that person with is filled with ellipsis. Description. Luthor shook his head. A poison. Please, get a healer and examine. Description. The guard pulled his arm away from Luthor and said, what water balloon? Description. Luthor's arms dropped to his side as he swallowed hard. Were you watching Dr. Fulger just now? You didn't see anything? Description. The guard said, yes, he's sitting in the area that I'm supposed to be watching so I haven't taken my eyes off him since he sat on that bench. Why are you making up a story about the head doctor? Description. Luthor looked back at Bray who had a huge smile. Luthor gulped and shivered. Description. The guard said, answer me, Luthor Timecrest. I was. Description. Luthor clenched his hands into fists. Description. Model 1 floated forward and said, it was my idea. Luthor was bored so I dared Luthor to make up a story to tell you. Description. The guard eyed Model 1, before turning to Luthor and saying, do not try to prank me again or there will be consequences. As Julia's son, you need to be setting a good example for your people. Description. Luthor nodded and walked away from the guard. I told you to stay quiet, Model 1. Description. Model 1 said, I'm sorry, Luthor. Description. Luthor sighed and looked back at Bray, who had a smug expression on his face. Bray tilted his head, considering Luthor's family. Description. Luthor's eyes widened. Bray raised one finger to his lips, signaling Luthor to stay quiet. Model 1, did you see me use my Levidos Melior Magnus, upstream? Description. Model 1 didn't reply for a bit before saying, no, I did not. Description. Luthor kneeled on the grass and grabbed his head with one hand.
I don't like when the music pauses.
Description. Model 1 said, are you okay, Luthor? Do you want me to confront Dr. Fulger? No, don't do that. Description. Luthor kneaded his trembling hands together. There's nothing we can do at the moment against someone like that. Bray is unstable and powerful. He prevented everyone but me from seeing what he did.
How, though?
Description. Luthor dug one nail into his palm, making a red indent. All I can do is avoid him for now. That's the best for my family. Description. Luthor closed his eyes before opening them again, his expression angry. Janaz, you fool. You've lost control. Description. Luthor shook his head and looked at Model 1. Just like me. Description. Model 1 said, you are not a fool, Luthor. Is Dr. Fulger threatening you? Do you want me to eliminate him? Just stay out of this, Model 1, and forget about everything that just happened, okay? Description. Model YouTube. Now. Description. Model 1 floated quietly before saying, understood, Luthor. I am deleting the files from my memory. System message. Luthor is waiting. That Fulger is a psychopath. Do you think the person he hit with the water balloon is going to get sick? One of two. You become Fulger's friend in the future. 2 of 2 responses. Button. That Fulger is a psychopath.
See, I don't know if Fulger is a bad person or not, but he is a bit strange.
That Fulger is a psychopath. Do you think the person he Description. Luthor blinked. You saw what happened. Description. Luthor paused and swallowed hard. I believe we both witnessed a murder. Description. Luthor rubbed one arm with his hand. But I am glad Fulger's magic didn't affect you. Description: Luthor heard the grass rustle behind him. He whirled around and sighed in relief when he saw his dad walking towards him. Description: Luthor peeked at the bench that Fulgur sat on, but the doctor is no longer there.
Wow.
Description: Julius had a plate of food and a cup of water in his hands. He set the plate and cup down in front of Luthor, who lowered his gaze. Thanks, Dad. How's the food? Description: Julius said, pretty good. King Janus has never skimped on the amenities of the non-Valdorian section of his parties. Though your plate is mostly vegetables and whatever your mom considers to be healthy, good food. But I dribbled Valdor's famous red sauce over things and even the healthy foods taste pretty good. Description: Luthor continued to avoid eye contact with his dad. Description: Julius said, and he looked over at his wife, who was busy feeding Ash a soft vegetable, before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a bag of barbecue chips. I managed to sneak this past her. Description: Julius handed the bag of chips to Luthor. Thanks. Mom said there were bags of chips reserved for me to pick up at the Elder Portal, but I didn't get the chance to go. Description: Luthor pulled open the bag and started eating the chips. Description: Julius paused for a moment before saying, what were you talking about with the guard just now? He seemed, annoyed. Description: Luthor lowered his gaze. Description: Julius ran a hand through his hair and said, Luthor, you understand that it's important for you to try being respectful toward Valdorians, right? I know you work hard, Dad, to promote peace and understanding between us and Valdorians, and I'm always making it harder for you. I did annoy that guard, so I'm sorry. I hope you can help smooth things over with him. Description: Julius said, I want to talk to you right now, Luthor. I want you to talk to me. Description: Julius paused again before saying, I saw your lips moving while I was getting food. Are you speaking to the pocket watch, Luthor? Description: Luthor looked bummed. I told you that the person isn't the time manipulator. I won't be using time magic to change my mistakes anytime soon, Dad, so don't worry. Description: Julius said, I am worried that you are speaking with a stranger that I can't even tell is real. Description: Luthor lowered his gaze.
Oh boy. Sounds like Ash. When Ash had the pocket watch.
Description: Julius said, I just don't like the thought of you speaking to a stranger. This person is special. Description: Julius said, or maybe the watch isn't special. Maybe it wasn't meant to connect you with the time manipulator. You said so yourself that this person you have connected with isn't Chronos Timecrest. Description: Luthor stopped eating the remaining chips and crinkled the bag.
Excuse me.
Description: Julius said, you still haven't told me how you injured your hand. Description: Julius knelt down and placed his hands firmly on Luthor's arms. He said, look at me, Luthor. Description: Luthor didn't look at his father. Description: Julius said, Luthor. Description: Luthor met his father's gaze. Description: Julius said, I know you're keeping things from me. I want you to tell me everything in your own time, but just tell me you're not in any real trouble or danger. Description: Luthor paused. He shook his head. No, no one is out to kill me, Dad. Description: Julius nodded, his expression still tense as he said, I love you, Luthor. Description: He rose from his kneeling position and looked down at the top of his son's head. Description: Julius said, I know how much you want to speak with a time manipulator, but maybe it's time to move on. Description: Julius said, your mom and I have decided that we're going to confiscate your watch for a month as punishment for everything you did today. Description: Luthor squeezed his hands into fists. Description: Julius reached out his hand to Luthor and said, please give me the watch, Luthor. Description: Luthor shook his head. You know that the watch eventually returns to me. Description: Julius said, Mom or I will keep it on us. Whichever one of us has the watch will be spending time with you that day, and you are to hand over the watch if it returns to you. Don't do this to me, Dad. Description: Julius said, this is the consequence of your actions against the Robertses. Description: Julius said, and both Mom and I think it's good for you to spend some time away from the watch. Description: Luthor took a deep breath. At least let me keep it for tonight. Description: Julius eyed his son with concern. Please, Dad? Don't make me sit through Jenna's party without my watch. Description: Julius sighed and said, I need to talk with your mother. Description: Luthor lowered his gaze and said in silence. Description: Julius said, what did you try to throw at them when you got angry? Mr. Roberts told me you tried throwing something at him. Description: Luthor remained silent. Description: Description: Julius said, Luthor, please tell me. You wouldn't believe me. Description: Julius said, try me, Luthor. I doubt it, Dad. You didn't believe me when I said Ray Fulgur is the one who made the Valdorian disease. Description: Julius looked sad. Luthor swallowed again and dug one nail into his palm, leaving an indentation. Why can't you believe me about Dr. Fulgur, Dad? Description: Julius said, you don't have any proof, son. I need to give Dr. Fulgur the benefit of the doubt. You think I would lie about something like this? Description: Julius said, I know you're desperately trying to prove that King Janus started the Valdorian disease. Yes, because then we would be free. Description: Julius knelt down and embraced Luthor in his arms. He whispered in Luthor's ears, King Janus could kill you. He is still the king of the most powerful empire. Description, Julius said, and he does hear about everything you're saying and doing against him. Description, Julius tightened his embrace and said, so please, just enjoy your life as a kid and let me handle this. Dad, I get you're worried for my safety. But the more time we give Janaz, the more likely he'll succeed at killing all of us. Description, Julius took a deep breath and let Luthor go. He got to his feet and said, I hope as the month progresses with your mom and I, you'll stop seeing it as a punishment. Take this opportunity to get your mind off the watch and think about something else. Description, Julius walked away and rejoined Description, Julius walked away and rejoined Helena. Description, Luthor watched his parents talk to each other and his mom glancing at him with a worried expression. Description, Helena started walking towards Luthor, but Julius placed one hand on her arm and shook his head. I have a feeling that it's going to be a long month ahead of me.
Oof.
Description, Luthor swallowed hard and pressed his jacket where the pocket watches. Time manipulator Chronos, if you can hear me, tell me what I should do. Description, Luthor waited in silence before sighing and looking up at the sky. Description, Luthor waited in silence before sighing and looking up at the sky.
Oh my gosh, people, stop texting.
Description, Luthor waited in silence before sighing and looking up at the sky. I wonder if we see the same stars. Description, Luthor paused. Sometimes, I want to run away. And not just sometimes, I want to run away. And not just from Janaz. My parents are so nice. I know they love me and I love them. But still, sometimes, I just want to run away. Description, Luthor shut his mouth as two guards walked past the perimeter of the non-Valdorian section. Description, one of the guards looked at Luthor and said, a storm is brewing tonight. Description, the other guard said, we don't see many violent storms in Everend, but tonight looks like we could be in for one of those. System message, Luthor is waiting, don't give up. Family is important. You should talk to your dad when you have a chance. Explain to him how he's making you feel. It'll continue to bother you if you don't, and I'm sure he would like it if you shared your thoughts with him too. One of two foreshadowing with bad weather is a rather cliche way of saying something ominous could happen tonight. But I think we're being warned, Luthor. Perhaps Patora is out to kill you tonight, so be careful. 2 of 2 responses. Button.
I don't think so.
Foreshadowing with bad weather is a rather cliche way of saying something ominous could happen tonight. But I think we're being warned, Luthor. Perhaps Patora is out to kill you tonight, so be careful. 2 of 2 responses.
I don't think so, though.
Don't give up. Family is important. You should talk
Let's
to
do
your
that one.
Magic has alert. Response changed.
Ugh!
A magic has come over the option and highlighted certain letters in your choice red. The rest of the letters fade out, revealing a hidden message. The letters animate and move together, forming a phrase. Okay, button. Okay, button. Magic has changed. Foreshadow. Vertical. Descriptive hail. Pocket watch. Music player. Memory. Magic has changed. System. Magic has changed your message to be read. And say, first comes curiosity. Button. Foreshadowing with bad weather is a rather. Magic has alert.
Why?
A magic has come. Okay.
Stop changing it!
System message. Magic has changed. System. Magic has changed your message to be read. And say, first comes curiosity. Messenger. Magic has changed. Magic has changed.
Alright, fine.
Respond. Description. Luthor received the message. Description. Luthor paused and thought for a moment. Curiosity was what drove me to try to connect with the time manipulator. Is that what you mean by first comes curiosity? Are you trying to say that I was curious about the pocket watch and that was the first system message?
No.
Someone used certain letters from my message and erased the rest. The line comes from a children's poem, I think. The person who blocked my messages probably did this too. 1 of 2 let me guess. Second comes desire. 2 of 2 responses. Someone used magic has alert.
Why?
Okay.
Stop!
Magic has let me guess. Second magic has alert.
Well, okay then.
Magic has changed your message. Magic has changed your message to response. Red message. Description. Smiley face emoji. Description. The red symbol was not transmitted. Description. Luthor received the message. Second comes desire. These messages aren't yours. Description. Luthor touched the pocket watch through his jacket. Time manipulator Chronos. Is it you? Second comes desire. Ellipsis. Description. Luthor paused. I do desire to speak with you. It's the only thing I want right now. Tell me what I need to do. System mess. Why are you hijacking my messages? Red text person. 1 of 3 Are you the one who wrote the children's poem? Red text person. Say nothing. Are you the one who wrote the children? Are you the one who wrote the children's poem? Response. Red message. Description. I am, but it's red message. Description. I am, but it's not for children. Notification. System message. Luthor is. Tell me about the red message. Description. Your message and red message. Description. Before we can move forward. However, we need Luthor to move. Red message. Description. Wouldn't you like to know too? Red message. Description. I also know. Red message.
Hang on.
Description. I am, but it's not for children.
Then why did they call it a children's poem? I don't get it.
Red message. Description. I also know what's behind the door. Red message. Description. Wouldn't you like to know too?
No.
Red message.
Not really.
Before we can move forward. However, we need Luthor to move forward.
How?
Red message. Description. Your message and the red text were not transmitted to Luthor. System. Tell me about the door. What's behind it? I would like to know. And how does Luthor move forward? 1 of 1 responses.
All right,
Button.
let's hit that.
Magic has alert. Response changed. Messenger. A magic has okay.
Oh, come on.
Read message. Description. System. Read message. Description. Your message. Magic has changed your message to be read. And say, to talk to me. Button. Magic has changed your message to be read. Response. Description. Luthor received the message. To talk to me. Description. Luthor nodded. What is it that I must do to talk to you? Time manipulator. System message. Luthor is waiting. I guess you're going to use me to tell him, so just get it over with. Tell us what is needed in order for you, red text person, to speak with Luthor directly. 1 of 1 responses. Magic has alert.
Stop changing my stupid messages to...
A magic has okay button.
Why?
Description. Magic has changed. Descriptive hail. Pocket watch. Music play. System message. Magic has changed your message to be read. And say, you must die. Luthor. Button. Magic has changed your message to be read. Response. Description. Luthor received the message. You must die. Luthor. Description. Luthor paused as he touched his head. He murmured. Description. Luthor paused as he touched his head. He murmured. To talk to me you must die. Luthor. Description. Model 1 stirred at Luthor's side, but didn't say anything. Description. Luthor squeezed his hands into fists. In order to talk to the time manipulator, I must die. Description. Luthor paused and pressed a hand to his heart. My heart's beating faster. Description. Luthor's breathing quickened. He shook. Am I afraid? Description. Luthor's breathing quickened. He shook his head and lowered his gaze. Am I afraid to die? Description. Luthor shook his head. Is the time manipulator really asking me to give up my life? I don't want to die. There has to be another way. Please tell me there is another way to talk to you, time manipulator. Description. Luthor touched the pocket watch through his jacket. It can't be hard for you to understand why I'm not just going to take my life because you asked, right? System message. Luthor is wait. Don't worry, Luthor. If you die, I can turn back time and revive you. I got your back. 1 of 2 red text person. Why must Luthor give up his life? There has to be another way. 2 of 2 responses.
Okay, let me...
Magic has alert.
Oh,
okay, but... Magic has changed your message to be... Messages. Now, 34,000... Magic has changed your message to be read. And don't worry, Luthor. Don't worry, Luthor. If you die, I can turn back time. Respond. Description. Luthor touched his head. This message sounds like you're not the time manipulator. I appreciate you wanting to help me, but... Description. Luthor paused and thought. Assuming I trust that you have this power and are willing to help me with it, we don't know if it's going to work on me. And if it fails, it's not like we can just try again. Description. Luthor swallowed hard and shook his head. Description. Helena approached with hurried steps. Description. Helena said, I need you to watch Ash for me, Luthor. The participants are coming out soon and I want my arms free to give Scarlet and Soul big hugs. Description. Luthor looks distracted. Description. Helena held out Ash to Luthor and said, Luthor, come on now, take Ash. Can you give Ash to Dad? Description. Luthor looked around for his father, but Helena pushed... Description. Luthor looked around for his father, but Helena pushed her baby against Luthor, who felt Ash slipping and immediately cradled Ash. Description. Luthor looked around for his father, but Helena pushed her baby against Luthor, who felt Ash slipping and immediately cradled Ash tightly with both arms. Description. Helena, who seemed in a hurry a moment ago, paused as she looked at her 2 children. Her expression showed a mixture of sadness and happiness. Description. After a bit, she said, we're a family, Luthor. We can overcome anything as a family. Description. Luthor looked down at Ash's scar. Why are you saying that to me all of a sudden? Description. Helena said, your dad told me about the conversation you 2 just had, and when I looked over just now, you seemed, troubled. Description. Luthor continued to look at Ash's scar. Are you here to take the watch away? Description. Helena pursed her lips. She said, your dad and I agreed that you can keep the watch for tonight. I came over to borrow Model 1 for the cupcakes. Description. Helena paused and said, also, Luthor, I have another favor to ask you. It has to do with a message. Description. Helena paused and said, also, Luthor, I have another favor to ask you. It has to do with a favor that Scarlet Ignis asked of me when I was her teacher. Description. Luthor arched his brow, his mom waiting for Helena to go on. Description. Helena said, Scarlet asked me to give her brother a lot of praise. She wanted Soul to feel needed and appreciated, so every chance she got, she would give her brother the credit or the spotlight. Weren't you bothered by that, Mom? Description. Helena took a deep breath and smiled. She said, you know your mother well. It did bother me. Description. Helena said, but Soul was a moody child and very protective of his sister. He'd get into fights often. When I started praising him like Scarlet asked, his behavior mellowed out. Description. Helena sighed and said, it bothered me to give unwarranted praise, but it seemed to give both kids some peace. Description. Helena looked sad.
Wait, so how old is Soul? How old are Soul and Scarlet in this past? I'm actually kind of curious.
Description. She said, I had a feeling the Ignises had a troubled home life. They were hiding from everyone. I visited their home often to check up on them. They lived with their father, who was single, but he seemed nice. Everything seemed okay on the surface. What favor are you asking of me, Mom? Description, Helena said, be kind to Soul with your words. I hope he has changed, but from what I remember, Soul's ego is easily bruised. Description, Helena said, also, Scarlet is blind. Description, Helena said, also, Scarlet is blind. I'm only mentioning this because you've never met a blind person before, Luthor. And Scarlet is the first blind person I met and, well, your mom made some mistakes.
Actually, no. You are not the first person who was a blind person. I'm also blind.
Description, Luthor arched his brow. Like what? Description, Helena took a deep breath and said, when I met Scarlet, I put a lot of imaginary limits on her based on how I thought of blindness. Description, Helena sighed and said, for example, I was afraid she'd get hurt walking around the schoolyard, even though she was fine before I showed up. I kept leading her to places and offering to help her to use the restroom. Description, Helena clasped her hands together and said, long story short, I feel really embarrassed. Actually, Scarlet had found a way to use fire magic to sense her surroundings. Description, Luthor arched his brow. Do you know how her magic works? Description, Helena tapped her feet while she paused to think. After a while she said, I remember she can't see details, but she would always find me when we played hide and seek. No matter how tricky I thought my hiding place was. Description, Helena said, but you know your mother doesn't have a magical bone in her body, so you should just ask Scarlet how she does it when you meet her. Description, Luthor smiled. I'm used to people using fire magic destructively. It would be interesting to see how I'm used to people using fire magic destructively. It would be interesting to see how Scarlet uses it. Description, Helena said, Scarlet told me she struggled a lot with fire magic because she was afraid of hurting someone by accident. But Soul helped her through it. System message, Luthor is wait, do the Ignises know you're human? 1 of 3 why does your mom care about the was Scarlet born blind? 3 of 3 responses, button. What, do the Ignises know you're human? 1 of 3 responses, button. Why does your mom care about the messenger? Why does your mom care about the Ignises so much? 2 of 3 was Scarlet born blind? What, do the Ignises know you're human? 1 of 3, YouTube, now, ribbon.
Okay, let's do that one.
Response, description, Luthor heard your messenger, now, description, Luthor heard your message in his head. Mom, do the Ignis siblings know you married a human? Description, Helena said, no, at the time I was their teacher, no one was even concerned about bloodlines and lineages. Description, Helena smiled and said, they just know I married the most handsome traveler there ever was that came to our village. Did you ever? Description, Luthor paused. Did you ever believe what Janice said about humans even for a moment? I know you would never be afraid of Dad or I, and you chose to live inside the quarantine zone with us. But were you ever afraid of other humans living in Alencia? Description, Helena looked Luthor in the eye and said, never. I promise, Luthor. I've always been supremely grateful that humans found a way into our world. And because of you and Ash, I'm a firm believer in how wonderful an alliance between humans and Alencia. Messenger.
Stop
Helena
texting!
looked Luthor in the eye and said, never. I promise, Luthor. I've always been supremely grateful that humans found a way into our world. And because of you and Ash, I'm a firm believer in how wonderful an alliance between humans and Alencians can be. Description, Helena said, the culprit, if there is one, behind the Valdorian disease is a very bad person regardless of their lineage. Description, Luthor nodded with a smile. Description, Helena fiddled with Luthor's hair and straightened out his jacket. Messenger, now, Mom. Description, Helena raised her hands in the air and said, okay, I'm done fixing you up. For now at least.
For now.
Description, Helena said, I'm going to head back to your father and watch Soul and Scarlet march in. Remember, be kind to Soul when I introduce you to him. For me? I don't have any reason to be unkind to him yet. Description, Helena nodded and said, the Ignis siblings have some hard battles ahead of them tonight and I wanted to make them feel supported. I'm just a little worried that you and Soul won't mesh well with each other. Description, Helena's eyes darted around, seemingly searching for words before she finally said, with what happened with the Robertses, you just seem easily agitated lately. Description, Luthor took a deep breath. Messenger, description, Helena said, description, Luthor took a deep breath. Description, Helena said, I heard from the Robertses that you accused them of putting themselves above their daughter's safety. Description, Helena said, as a mother, I would be so angry at the person who claims I would knowingly put my children in danger, but as your mom, Luthor, I just don't want you to feel angry or bitter inside because of the situation we are in with King Janus. Description, Helena said, I know you truly believe that the king is out to hurt us. Just, ellipsis, please, trust that your father and I will never, ever let anyone hurt you or Ash. Description, the lights dimmed around the courtyard and the area the participants are coming through lit up brightly. Description, Helena looked at Luthor, but Luthor avoided his mom's gaze. Description, Helena said, I'm going to go greet Scarlet and Soul first before I introduce them to our family. Description, she motioned for Model 1 to follow her, but Model 1 didn't move. Model 1, please follow my mom and do as she says. Description, Helena gave both Ash and Luthor a kiss on the head before rejoining Julius with Model 1 following behind her. Description, Luthor looked at his parents. Mom, Dad, Dad, I'm sorry. I can't just wait around and let you handle things with Janice. Description, Luthor lowered his gaze. Because I think you both will fail. Description, Ash reached up to Luthor's face with both chubby hands and made happy baby sounds. I need to speak with a time manipulator, Ash. Our ancestor is the very first human who made his way into Valencia. I'm sure he won't like what Janus is doing to us. But the only way to speak with a time manipulator is to die apparently. Description: Ash made fussy baby sounds. Luthor looked deep into Ash's big purple eyes. Don't worry, Ash. I'll find a way to get Chronos help that doesn't involve me dying. Description: Luthor looked down at Ash's scar. What will happen to your scar if I die, Ash? What will happen to our family? I'm not going to leave you alone knowing Janus is still after us humans. Not to mention that Psycho Dr. Fulger is lurking around too. I'm not going anywhere. Description: Ash stopped wriggling, touched Luthor's chin and made happy baby sounds again. Description: Luthor smiled, but looked sad. Don't grow up yet, Ash. I don't want you to grow up feeling like a prisoner. I'm going to set us free, Ash. We'll be able to go wherever we want, do whatever we like and be whoever we want to be. Description: Luthor hugged Ash tightly. I'm sorry, Ash. I haven't been a good brother to you. Promise you won't grow up loving me? I might never figure out how to be a good brother and I don't want to hurt you. Description: Luthor looked at his parents in the distance. Julius had one arm around Helena and was rubbing her arm. Model 1 floated next to Helena, but was looking at Luthor. People tend to get hurt when they love me. Description: Luthor arched his brows. Ash's head seemed to shake in a side-to-side motion, as if disagreeing. Luthor smiled. Description: Luthor arched his brows. Ash's head seemed to shake in a side-to-side motion, as if disagreeing. Don't be so stubborn, okay, Ash? Let me love you and take care of you, but don't love me back. System message: Luthor is waiting. It doesn't seem like Luthor's willing to die to talk to you. Red text person. 1 of 4 Why are you holding out on speaking with Luthor? Red text person. I'm concerned when you seem so calm when thinking about dying. 3. Promise me you'll love Ash. 4 of 4 responses. Button. Why are you holding out on speaking with Luthor? Red text person.
I
Do you
don't
intend to help?
know.
Promise me you'll love Ash. 4 of 4 responses.
I'm gonna do that one.
Promise me you'll love Ash. Respond: I promise. Description: Luthor paused and lowered his gaze. It's an easy promise for me to make. But it feels weird to have this request come from you.
Why?
Description: The participants of the trials came filing into the courtyard led by the proprietor, High Mage Rudel Valdor. Description: Luthor looked up. Description: With Ash in arm, Luthor stepped closer to the area where the participants are marching. Description: All of the participants are adults except for 2 teenagers with brilliant red hair.
Okay, that answers my question.
Description: Valdor floated in front of the participants and frowned at Helena when she waved at the teenagers with red hair.
So my guess is probably Ignis and Scarlet are close to Luthor's age. Not exactly, but in the same... Well, no. Well, they say teenagers. I don't know, but I would say 13, 14. No, I don't know.
I guess those 2 must be Scarlet and Soul Ignis.
Maybe 16?
Description: Scarlet has extremely straight, shoulder-length hair with the ends forming a perfect horizontal line. She is wearing many layers of clothing that seem to be weighing her down. Description: Soul has fluffy red hair and is wearing a tank top and shorts, showing off his toned, muscled arms and legs. His eyes are large with wonder as he looks around the courtyard. Description: Scarlet looked straight forward. Her shoes are softly glowing red. I wonder if it was hard for Scarlet to have a brother she couldn't be honest with and made her feel like she had to tiptoe around his feelings. Description: Luthor shook his head and hugged Ash, who had fallen asleep in Luthor's arms. Not that I know how to be a great brother. Description: Helena turned around to Luthor and waved at him to come over. With all these people around, I've been thinking of secret gestures I could do to communicate with you when I can't respond out loud. From now on, if I tap my finger once it'll mean yes. Twice will mean no. Even if I don't end up using these gestures, there's no harm in increasing our options for communicating. W.A. System message. Got it. Once means yes. Twice means got it.
Got it.
Once means... Respond. Description: Luthor nodded. Description: Luthor started to make his way over to his parents, but caught Valdor staring at him. Description: Valdor actually halted and locked gazes with Luthor. The trial participants piled behind him. Description: People followed Valdor's gaze and looked at Luthor too. Luthor's parents turned around and looked at their son with puzzled expressions. Description: After a while, Valdor resumed walking again. That was weird. Description: Luthor paused. I may be reaching, but I suspect that Valdor's weird behavior just now has something to do with the pocket watch. Valdor has never paid me any attention before, so why today of all days?
I do not know.
Description: Luthor paused, looking thoughtful. Today, I connected to you through the pocket watch. Today, I met someone who knew the name Chronos Timecrest. Today, someone else messaged me through the pocket watch telling me to die. I don't think it's a coincidence Valdor noticed me today. Description: Luthor began walking over to Valdor. I'm going to ask him about Chronos Timecrest. Valdor is a powerful mage and one of the oldest Valdorians. He has lived many lifetimes before Janus was even born. Maybe Janus learned about the first human from Valdor. Description: Luthor paused again. I'm putting the description.
Whoops.
Luthor paused again. I'm putting the pocket watch at risk talking to Valdor, but I feel strongly about my hunch. And it's either this or die or hope for Patora to show up again. I prefer acting tonight before ending up under my parents' surveillance for a month. Description: Luthor is making his way through the crowd of non-Valdorian guests who surrounded Valdor and the trial participants. Description: A hand grabbed onto Luthor's arm. Luthor looked over his shoulder at his father. Description: Julius said, "Where are you going, Luthor?" "I want to talk to High Mage Valdor." Description: Julius pulled his son away from the crowd of non-Valdorian guests. He said, description:
Whoops.
Julius pulled his son away from the crowd of non-Valdorian guests. He said, "The High Mage gave you a strange look. Do you know what that was about? Are you in some sort of trouble?" Description: Luthor shook his head. "I have a hunch Valdor knows something about Chronos Timecrest. I want to see if I can get any information out of him, Dad." Description: Julius said, "That's not a good idea, Luthor. Valdor hates humans and you've seen how his trials are. He doesn't care if people get slaughtered. He encourages children to enter his trials knowing they don't have the skills to survive. I don't want you to anger someone like that."
Dude, why would he encourage or force children into... Did I?
Description: Julius said, "That's not a good idea, Luthor. Valdor hates humans and you've seen how his trials are. He doesn't care if people get slaughtered. He encourages children to enter his trials knowing they don't have the skills to survive. I don't want you to anger someone like that."
Dude! Why would you encourage children to enter... That is just wrong, dude. That is just wrong.
Description:
Wow.
Luthor tightened his grip on Ash. Description: Julius said, "Besides, I've already tried talking to him. When we earned a good standing with King Janus, I tried asking around about Chronos." Description: Julius said, "Even if the king or the High Mage knows anything about the Time Manipulator, it does not seem like they are willing to share with us. Dad, don't you think that it's weird that Valdor stood still and looked directly at me on the same day I activated the pocket watch? I have a feeling today is different and maybe Valdor will tell me something." Description: Julius said, "Did the stranger on the watch put you up to this?" "No." Description: Julius frowned and said, "Can I talk to you in private?" Description: Luthor narrowed his eyes at Julius. "Dad, Valdor just finished giving his speech to the participants." Description: Julius continued to hold on to Luthor's arm as he said, "Please close the pocket watch, Luthor. I want to talk to you alone." Description: Luthor sighed as he handed Ash to Julius and took out the pocket watch. Description: Luthor held the watch in his hand without handing it over to Julius. Description: Julius said, "Luthor, believe that your mother and I are on your side. Do you believe that?" Description: Luthor held onto the watch and looked in the direction of Valdor. The High Mage glanced at Luthor again as he made his way towards the reception hall. Description: Julius said, "Close the watch, Luthor." He paused. Description: Julius said, "Close the watch, Luthor." He paused and said, "I'm fine if you see me as an enemy. I'll become your greatest enemy if it means keeping you safe." Description: Ash woke up in Julius' arms and started crying. Description: Luthor swallowed hard and closed the pocket watch. System message: Connection lost. 21 minutes 40 seconds. Skip timer for 1 skip crystal. You have 9 skip crystals remaining.
Okay.
Skip timer for 1.
Let's see.
Description: Dad. Description: Back. Chapter 12.
Okay, yeah, we're still in chapter 12.
The current 4,400 messages responded. Got it. Description: Luthor nodded. Messages. Amonic responded. Got it. Once means yes. Twice means
Wait, whoa,
no.
whoa, 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 whoa.
The current four message respond. Description. Description. Luthor started to make his way over to his parents, but caught Valdor staring at him. Vertical scroll 11, 20, 34, 50, 8, 9,
Let me go all the way down here.
100. Description. Julius moved next to Luthor. No, I'm fine. Description. The pocket watch clicked open.
Okay, there we go.
Description. Luthor filled cups of water from the refreshment table. He is standing with his back to his parents, who are nearby with Scarlet and Solignes. Model. Description. Luthor filled cups of water from the refreshment table. He is standing with his back to his parents, who are nearby with Scarlet and Solignes. Model 1 is floating by Luthor. Description. Helena said, "Luthor, do you need help carrying the cups?" Description. Luthor quickly took his hand out of his inner jacket pocket and looked over his shoulder. He saw no. Description. Luthor quickly took his hand out of his inner jacket pocket and looked over his shoulder. He saw Helena behind him. Julius, cradling a sleeping Ash, is watching Luthor. No, I'm fine. Description. Luthor passed out cups of water to the Ignis siblings and his mother before rejoining the group. Description. Helena said, "Thank you, Luthor." Description. Julius moved next to Luthor, sandwiching his son between himself and Helena. Luthor sighed. System message. Luthor is waiting. Did you get to speak with Valdor? 1 of 2. I'm assuming this isn't a good time for us to talk. 2 of 2 responses. Button. I'm assuming this isn't a good time for us to talk. 2 responded. Description. Luthor heard your message in his head. Description. Luthor frowned and tapped his leg once. Description. The trial participants had mixed in with the non-Valdorian guests, but while the other guests are enjoying themselves, the participants seem tense. Description. Some participants focused on refueling themselves at the refreshment tables, eating everything they could as if it were their last meal. Some kept to themselves, observing from the sidelines, while others tried to talk to as many other participants as possible. Description: the only Valdorians nearby are the soldiers guarding the courtyard. Description: Scarlet said, "What type of cupcake is it, Mrs. Reed? I smell something salty." Description: Helena said, "It's a sea salt chocolate cupcake."
Oh, that sounds so good.
Description: Sol looked at his sister and said, "The cupcake and frosting are both brown. There are white crystals sprinkled on top of the frosting. I'm guessing that's the sea salt." Description: Scarlet smiled and said, "Thank you, brother, for describing it to me." Description: when she spoke, Scarlet looked in the direction of Sol, but her pale, sunrise-colored eyes did not focus on him. Description: the Ignis siblings began eating their cupcakes. Description: Sol dug into the cake, frosting getting on his lips and the corners of his mouth, crumbs dropping everywhere. He ate the whole cupcake in a matter of seconds and chugged down the water.
Jeez.
Description: Scarlet ate slower, in a deliberate manner, licking her way bit by bit through the top layers of frosting. Description: Scarlet said, "MMMHMMM. I haven't had chocolate in forever. I wish I could eat it all the time." Description: Sol blushed and said, "Sheesh, if I knew you wanted to have chocolate so much, Scar, I'd have bought you all the chocolate." Description: Scarlet said, "Right. Thank you, brother. I should have told you that I wanted it." Description: Sol said, "After we win these trials, we'll feast on chocolate." Description: Luthor eyed the glowing hand Scarlet used to hold the cupcake. Scarlet, my mom told me you could use fire magic to sense your surroundings. Can you tell me how it works? Description: Scarlet stopped eating and turned to Luthor. She said with a smile, "I'm infusing some of my body heat into the cupcake so I can sense its shape." Description: Luthor tilted his head and eyed the heavy clothing Scarlet is wearing. Body heat? Then are you wearing all those extra layers of clothing to help you regenerate body heat? Description: Scarlet nodded and said, "I can sense shapes, but not details in." Description: Sol gave Scarlet a nudge and said in a low voice, "Scar, don't say your powers out loud. Our competition thinks you're completely blind. Let's keep it that way so we have the element of surprise if we need it." Description: Scarlet said, "But Luthor is not competing in the trials, brother. I don't see any harm in explaining how I use fire magic to see the world." "I'm interested in learning more, Scarlet. People tend to use fire magic destructively, but it looks like you found another approach." Description: Scarlet smiled and started to speak again, but Sol said, "The other participants could overhear. You should actually turn off your powers. I can just describe things to you." Description: Scarlet paused before nodding. Both her hand holding the cupcake and her shoes stopped glowing red. She said, "You're right, Sol." Description: Helena cleared her throat and said, "That's really smart thinking, Sol." Description: Sol flashed a huge smile. Description: Helena said, "Scarlet and Sol, tell me, ellipsis, why do you both want to join Valdor? I'm just worried about you two. We've seen quite a few of these trials and people get hurt badly. Besides, Valdorians are, ellipsis, very snobby towards everyone else. I'm not sure you will enjoy working for them." Description: Scarlet said, "It's a turn to support our father and Valdor pays better than any guild." Description: Sol said, "But we don't need the gold. I don't mind getting paid, but we want to join the Valdorian army because they have strong mages that we can learn from." Description: Scarlet said, "Right, we don't need the gold." Description: Sol looked at Julius and said, "Mr. Reed, I heard from Miss Lena, Mrs. Reed that your family was invited because you helped design and construct parts of the Valdorian palace. Did you get to meet King Janus? How do you like working for Valdor?" Description: Julius was looking at Luthor and didn't seem to hear Sol. Description: Sol said, "Mr. Reed?" Description: Julius looked briefly at Sol and said, "It's not Reed. It's Timecrest." Description: Luthor lowered his gaze. Description: Sol blinked and said, "Sir, I thought your last name was Reed?" Description: Helena glanced at her husband before she said, "Julius' last name is Reed, but we decided to change our names to Timecrest. But you can just call my husband Julius and I would love it if you still called me Miss Lena like you used to when I was your teacher." Description: Scarlet said, "Miss Lena, ellipsis." Her lips curled into a warm smile as she said the name. Scarlet said, "We miss you so much, Miss Lena." Description: Helena said, "I missed you both too. I can say I loved teaching, but you two made my days at the schoolyard more enjoyable." Description: Sol said, "Why did you decide to change your last name to Timecrest?"
That's what I want to know.
Description: Julius said, "We want to support our son Luthor. To let him know no matter what we're on his side."
Oh, yeah.
Description: Luthor clenched his hands into fists. Description: Sol narrowed his eyes and said, "What does it have to do with changing your last name?" Description: Helena glanced at her husband again, before she smiled and put an arm around Luthor. She said, "Luthor here is passionate about time magic. He wants to become a time mage in the future and Julius and I wanted to show our support by changing our last name to one that sounded fitting for a time mage." Description: A moment of silence fell amongst the group as Sol eyed Luthor. Description: Sol continued to eye Luthor. Description: After a while he laughed and said, "A time mage, huh? You certainly have big dreams, Luthor." Description: He said, "Don't you think if controlling time were possible, the first mage would have been able to do it or someone else would have discovered it by now? Magic has been around for a long time after all. It wasn't until recently that we learned that magic can be stored into containers and used at a later time. And no mage has been able to see the aura in everything like the first mage can. Don't you think there's a lot more to magic that we don't know? Description, Soul frowned and turned to Helena. Description, he said, Miss Lena, both you and Mr. Reed can't use magic, right? I remember you telling us that you didn't want to date a mage because they get themselves into dangerous situations. Description, Scarlet quietly finished her cupcake.
Why did the music pause?
Description, Luthor narrowed his eyes, but Helena gave Luthor's shoulder a hard squeeze. Description, she started to open her mouth, but Julius looked at Soul and said, I told you my last name is Timecrest. Please refer to me as Mr. Timecrest. Description, Helena took a deep breath and said, we just love the name. Description, the group fell silent for a bit. Description, Soul crossed his arms and said, those aura containers you spoke about, Luthor, you know the Empire's mages invented those, right? Description, Soul said, joining Valdor will ensure we are around the best. You actually inspired me into researching time magic, Luthor. I'll be sure to let Miss Lena know when I come up with something. System message, Luthor is waiting. Red text person, do you know what Luthor and his dad talked about? 1 of 2 red text person, what do you think of Scarlet and Soul Ignis? 2 of 2 responses, button. Red text person, what do you think of red message, description, Scarlet is the one we need.
Why?
Red message, description, your message and the red text were not description, an elder male voice said, you are Luthor Timecrest?
Why do we need Scarlet? I don't understand.
Description, Luthor took a few steps back as Valdor phased in front of him. Description, Valdor, a youthful-looking senior only showing slight signs of age and despite living many lifetimes, floated above the ground as he looked down at Luthor over the bridge of his nose. Description, Soul's mouth dropped and Scarlet looked surprised. She whispered to Soul, is someone there? Description, Soul swallowed hard, but didn't reply. Description, Julius snapped out of his daze and said, I'm surprised to see you outside, High Mage Valdor. Is the ceremony inside the reception hall with King Janus over? Description, Valdor said, no, but I must speak with Luthor Timecrest. The High Mage took off his glove and scratched his arm as if he had an unbearable itch, before placing his glove back on his hand again. Description, he locked gazes with Luthor and said, I wanted to speak to you ever since I led the participants out and saw you from afar. Description, Helena smiled, but the corners of her lips twitched as she said, please tell us what you'd like to say, High Mage Valdor. You look description, so description,
Whoops.
Helena smiled, but the corners of her lips twitched as she said, please tell us what you'd like to say, High Mage Valdor. You look so serious that you're making me nervous. Description, Soul said, High Mage Valdor, my name is Soul. Description, Valdor said, be quiet. Leave my sight now. Description, Soul stiffened. Scarlet's shoes began to glow and she wrapped one arm around Soul's arm, dragging him away. With a shocked and irritated expression, Soul looked over his shoulder the whole time as they distanced themselves from Valdor. Description, Valdor raised one hand and the pocket watch floated through Luthor's jacket. At the same time, the glove on Valdor's raised hand dropped to the ground and revealed a semi-transparent hand underneath. Description, Luthor's eyes widened as he made a frantic grab for the watch, but his hand went right through, and the watch floated into Valdor's gloved hand. Description, Julius eyed the opened watch lid. Description, the semi-transparent hand that Valdor had raised transformed back into a normal-looking hand.
Oh, that's weird.
Description, Luthor swallowed hard. Description, Valdor said, you have activated the pocket watch, but haven't been successful in speaking with the time manipulator. Description, Luthor narrowed his eyes as Julius and Helena glanced at each other. Description, Julius said, we don't know what you're talking about, High Mage. Description, Luthor stepped towards Valdor. Tell me how to speak with the time manipulator. Description, Valdor said, complete the mage trials tonight. Description, Helena's voice cracked and said, that's ridiculous. There's no point for my son to participate in the trials. He can join the Valdorian army. Description, Julius stepped in between Valdor and Luthor and said, I can't agree to this, High Mage Valdor. If you continue to request that Luthor joins the trials, I will have to speak with King Janus about it. Description, Valdor said, I don't want your son to join our army. I want Luthor Timecrest dead. Description, Helena balled her hands up into fists and tried to lunge at Description, Helena balled her hands up into fists and tried to lunge at Valdor, but he dodged her easily. Description, Ash started crying in Julia's arms. Description, Model 1 said, I cannot allow you to. Stay out of it, Model 1. Description, Luthor stepped out from behind his father and looked at his parents. Stay out of it, Mom and Dad. Description, he looked up at Valdor. If I get through your trials, you'll tell me how I can speak with time manipulator Chronos? Description, Helena looked like her eyes were about to pop out of her skull. She shook her head and grabbed onto Luthor's arms. She said, no, we're leaving. Description, Valdor said, do as I say and you will find the answer you seek, Luthor Timecrest. Okay, I'll enter. Description, Julius and Helena both said in unison, you will do no such thing. Ash reached out both hands to Luthor. Description, Luthor looked at Valdor. I'll enter on one more condition. Description, Valdor said, you're in no position to negotiate. He scratched himself on the arm again. If I win your mage trials, you'll tell me how to speak with a time manipulator and you'll ensure that no one else dies in your trials again. Description: Valdor paused and continued to scratch himself. He seemed to be fighting an inner battle. Description: He finally said, "Fine, but you won't win." "How are you so sure I'm going to fail?" Description: Valdor smiled and said, "Because this world is not made for you, Luthor Timecrest." Description: Valdor said, "This world is for people who are willing to go all the way and you're not." System message: Luthor is waiting. Can you ask Valdor why he wants you dead, Luthor? 1 of 2 Did you have something to do with this? Red text person. 2 of 2 responses. Button.
I don't know.
Can you ask Valdor why he
Let's ask why.
Response: Description: Luthor heard your message in his head. He looked, "Why do you want me dead?" Description: Helena fumed and said, "Because this man is crazy." Description: Valdor pulled a tuft of his white hair and said, "My time is finally coming to an end and it would mean the world to me to see you removed from my king's path before I die, Luthor Timecrest. I can tell you bother him for some reason." Description: Julius said, "You must be confused, High Mage Valdor. The Timecrest family has a very amicable relationship with the king. There's no way King Janus would condone what you're doing. Where is King Janus? I need to speak with him. Why is Janus so bothered by me?" Description: Valdor floated downwards and seized Luthor's wrist with his gloved hand. Luthor gawked in surprise at the hand on his wrist. Description: Valdor's voice rose as he said, "And my king lets you call him by his name. I don't understand why. Everything King Janus has ever done has made sense to me, except when it comes to you. Your hand is on me." Description: Valdor looked surprised to see his bare hand that he used to cast magic before clutching Luthor's wrist. He immediately released Luthor. Description: Julius looked up at the open lid on the pocket watch, his expression angry. He said, "You and the watch, leave my son alone. What kind of person would trick a kid like this?" "Stop it, Dad. This is my decision. I'm being the disobedient son again. Blame me." Description: Model 1 said, "Luthor, I know your goal is to speak with a time manipulator, but I also do not want you to put your own life at risk." Description: Helena said, "I've let this farce go on long enough." She grabbed onto Luthor's arms and started pulling him away. Description: Luthor broke free of Helena and faced his parents. "You two never believed me." Description: Luthor looked at Julius. "I told you the truth, Dad. The actual truth. Everything. And what did you do? Did you believe me?" Description: Helena started shaking and Julius opened his mouth, but words couldn't Description: Helena started shaking and Julius opened his mouth, but words couldn't come out. "You two never understood me. You may have changed your last names, but I've always felt like I was the only Timecrest." Description: Valdor arched his brow at Luthor as he rolled the pocket watch around in his hand before snapping the lid shut on the pocket watch. System message: Connection lost. 28 minutes. Skip timer for 1 skip crystal.
Well.
Skip timer for 1 skip crystal. Description: He is standing beside. Description: The pocket watch clicked open and Luthor placed the watch back in his inner jacket pocket, an expression of relief on his face. Description: He is standing beside Valdor, facing the group of participants. The group had gathered in a secluded garden area surrounded by Valdorian guards and tall shrubbery under the cloudy night sky. Description: The ground of the secluded garden area is covered by a large teleportation glyph. Description: Luthor's family, Model 1 and other non-Valdorian guests were not present in the area. Description: Valdor said, "This is Luthor Timecrest. He will be entering into the trials tonight." Description: Luthor's relieved expression faded as he glanced at the other participants. None of them look happy. Some of them look very unhappy. Description: Luthor's eyes settled on Soul and Scarlet Ignis in the crowd. Soul has his arms crossed and a frown on his face. Scarlet looks worried. Description: Valdor said, "You all look upset at having extra competition, but Luthor is no threat. He is not willing to kill anyone tonight." Description: Some participants snickered and licked their lips as they heard this. Description: Valdor said, "Luthor thinks he can beat someone who is willing to give up more. He is wrong." Description: Luthor stood firmly and turned to Valdor.
Wait, who?
Description: Luthor stood firm. "You
Okay.
promised me that no one else will have to die if I win these trials. Repeat your promise in front of everyone. I don't want you to go back on your word, High Mage Valdor." Description: Scarlet perked up, while Soul's frown deepened. A mixed bag of emotions played out on the other participants' faces. Description: Valdor scratched his arm as he silently regarded Luthor with his steely-eyed gaze. Description: After a while, Valdor faced the participants and said, "I, Rudel Valdor, promise that if Luthor Timecrest wins the trials, I shall prevent killing in all future Valdorian trials." Description: Expressions of shock spread quickly across the participants' faces. "And if you die?" Description: Gasps could be heard from some of the participants. Description: Valdor paused before he said, "When I die, my successor and future proprietor of these trials will continue this promise." Description: Valdor said, "All you have to do, Luthor, is win. I just want to be clear that killing someone won't disqualify you from this promise. I am not going to kill anyone." Description: Luthor paused. "What are the challenges?" Description: Valdor said, "I will announce the challenges when you are all inside the arena." Description: Valdor faced the participants and said, "Until the trials begin, you may talk amongst yourselves, but you are not allowed to leave this area."
Well.
my Q. Description, without another word, Valdor phased. Description, my Q. Description, without another word, Valdor phased away. Description, Luthor faced the participants. Let's work together. Description, Luthor looked at the Valdorian guards standing by, but none of them stirred from their post. Luthor, no matter what. Description, Luthor looked at the Valdorian guards standing by, but none of them stirred from their post. Luthor turned back to the participants and smiled. No matter what the challenges are tonight, let's work together, everyone. Just think, tonight can be the first Valdorian trials where no one dies. Description, Soul said, by work together, you mean, let you win? Description, some participants glanced nervously at the Valdorian guards standing nearby, but the guards are just looking on, expressionless. Valdor's challenges will push us to kill each other, no doubt. But if I win, you can enter into these trials in the future when your safety is guaranteed. Description, the participants looked at each other, considering Luthor's word. Description, Soul said, failures have to wait 4 years before they can reapply. Description, he said, and but the Chronos Valdor won't let anyone who works with you reapply. What the? Die tonight and everything ends for you. Description, Scarlet raised her hand and touched Soul's arm. Soul's expression softened for a bit. Description, Scarlet said, Soul, I think we should help Luthor. Even if we can't work for Valdor, we'll still do okay for ourselves in a guild. Description, Soul's mouth dropped open a little, before it twisted in a frown as he said, we agreed on Valdor. Description, Scarlet furrowed her brows and said, brother, ellipsis, I never. Description, Soul tore his arm away from Scarlet and pushed his way through the participants until he stood facing Luthor. Description, Soul sneered and said, you don't make any sense to me, Luthor. You want stuff, but you're not willing to do the hard things for it. Instead, you want us to give up on our goals to help you. Description, Soul said, well, I worked hard to be here. Description, he said, do you know how much Valdorian history I memorized to pass the written exam for these trials? Description, Soul said, I hate history, but I pushed myself to study until my head felt like it was going to split open.
Oof.
Description, Soul said, I didn't see you at the written exams, Luthor. Description, Soul lifted his shirt, showing a chest full of wounds. Description, he said, I pushed myself beyond all of my limits training my magic. Where are your scars, Luthor? Description, some of the participants nodded. Description, Soul said, I earned my place in this trial, unlike you, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. Description, Soul locked gazes with Luthor and said, I'm not going to let you take away something that belongs to me. Description, Luthor, description, a fair description.
Okay, that's a lot of stuff for you guys. Okay. So, I'm gonna be right back, guys, so I can take a break for a minute, and then I'll be back. Okay, guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. I had to take a break, and also I had to go do something. So, let's start back again.
Timecrest. Actions. Active Timecrest. Speaking rate. Timecrest. 75% speaking rate. Volume. Speaking 60%.
Okay.
Words. Why do you want me dead? Description. Helena Fume. Description. Description. Julius said. Rose 50. Verdict.
Okay.
57. 199. Description. Someone near the front said. Oh, so you're a fire mage. Description. Soul whirled around and bared his teeth at Luthor.
Let's see here.
Soul glanced at Scarlet and swallowed hard before he said. Of course not. My sister. Description. Luthor pointed at Scarlet, who is frowning. Are you willing to win at the cost of your sister's life?
Where was I?
Description. Soul said, I earned my place in this trial, unlike you, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to win.
Here we go.
Description. Soul locked gazes with Luthor and said, I'm not going to let you take away something that belongs to me. Luthor Timecrest. Not a description. Soul locked gazes with Luthor and said, I'm not going to let you take away something that belongs to me. Luthor Timecrest. Not again.
Wait. Not again? What?
Description. Luthor arched his brow as he considered Soul's statement. Description. Soul turned to the participants and pointed one thumb over his shoulder at Luthor. Soul said, are we going to let all the hard work we did to get here go to waste for some kid's stupid fantasy where we all work together in love and harmony? Description. Luthor shook his head and clenched his fist. Are you willing to win at the cost of your sister's life? Description. Soul stiffened, his face shocked and confused. He looked over his shoulder at Luthor and stammered, what kind of question is that? A fair one. You just said you're willing to do anything to win. Description. Luthor pointed at Scarlet, who is frowning. Are you willing to kill your sister to win? Are you willing to let others here kill her to win? Description. Soul glanced at Scarlet and swallowed hard before he said, of course not. My sister and I are going to win together. Description. Soul said, I'm going to beat anyone here who tries to hurt me or my sister. I don't know why any of us should be listening to a hothead who is just out for his own gains.
Dude.
Description. Soul whirled around and bared his teeth at Luthor. He said, shut up, I'm going to. Description. One of the participants called out, why don't you shut up, hothead? All your yapping is giving me a bigger headache than a Valdorian history exam.
Ow!
Description. Some participants started snickering at Soul. Description. Soul turned and raised both fists towards the participants. Soul said, who said that? I'm going to burn whoever said that. Description. Someone near the front said, oh, so you're a fire mage, I assume? Description. Soul frowned and said, so what? It doesn't matter if you know what kind of magic I can cast. You're all going to lose to me. YouTube. Now. Description. Soul frowned and said, so what? It doesn't matter if you know what kind of magic I can cast. You're all going to lose to me. Description. Luthor sighed. Description. Scarlet approached Soul, her shoes glowing red, but he turned and stormed away from the group, only stopping when Valdorian guards blocked his way. System message. Luthor is waiting. Luthor, can we go talk to Soul? 1 of 2 response. Luthor, can we go talk to Scarlet? 2 of 2 responses. Button.
Okay. I'm gonna save this.
Back. Button. Back. Load settings. Button.
Because...
Setting. If you are logged into Game Center, you will be...
Yeah, I know.
Last save. Voiceover. Message. Last save game. Save game. Save. But. Settings. Alert. Okay. But okay. If music follows. New. Continue. Button. New game. New game. Continue. But continue. Luthor. Can we go talk? System. Luthor. Can we go talk to Soul? 1 of 2. Luthor. Can we go talk to Soul? 1. Responded. Description. Luthor dug one nail into his palm as he narrowed his eyes at Soul. Description. He took a deep breath and tapped his leg once, before walking towards Soul. Description. Scarlet stepped in front of him and said, stay away from my brother. You have caused Soul enough trouble for tonight. Description. Luthor took another deep breath and looked around. The other participants are staring at him and Scarlet. Description. Luthor said quietly, I caused him trouble. Some participants, including you, seemed to have been considering my proposal until Soul riled them up. It would have been easier for Soul to win if more people decided not to fight tonight. Description. Scarlet sighed and nodded. She said, you're right, but you caused my brother pain tonight. That annoys me. Description. Luthor took another deep breath.
Oops.
I don't want to fight you or your brother. YouTube. Now. I don't want to fight you or your brother, Scarlet. I'm trying to do the opposite. But Soul seems to hate me, and I just met him.
So Scarlet actually doesn't seem that bad. She actually seems really nice.
Description. Luthor paused. Your brother said he won't let me take away something that belongs to him again. What does he mean? Description. Scarlet took a deep breath and said, Miss Lena leaving was hard on the both of us. Description. Luthor sighed. I figured as much. He thinks my mom belongs to him. And Soul hates me for stealing my mom away from him. Description. Luthor shook his head and sighed again. I hope you at least realize how crazy it is for Soul to be angry with me, Scarlet. Description. Scarlet said, my brother craves being loved, and when he finds love, he doesn't want to let it go. I wish my love was enough for him, but unfortunately it isn't, and I want Soul to be happy. So you're here for him. Description. Scarlet said, I also want to learn from the Valdorian mages. Magic has allowed me to sense the world in a different way, a world filled with warmth. Description. Scarlet said, my magic has its weak spots, but I think I can improve on some of them with practice and guidance. Like what? Description. Scarlet said, I shouldn't be discussing that when there are other participants around. Are you going to kill for Soul? Description. Scarlet gulped and stammered, I'm not here to kill anyone. Description. The glyph covering the ground started glowing. Description. Luthor took a deep breath. Description. Scarlet said, what's happening, Luthor? The trial is starting. System message. The participants are teleporting. Description. Luthor and the rest of the participants phased into a large arena surrounded by platforms.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, that is so cool. They actually have sound effects for the... Whoa, okay, that's actually kind of cool.
Description. The platforms cascaded in a circle, like giant steps of a spiraling staircase, around the arena. The flat ground of the arena is covered in sand. Description. Hundreds of orb containers that stored light magic suspended around them, illuminating the darkness. Vision mirrors floated around all the platforms. Description. Luthor shielded his eyes against the light and looked at the lowest platform. Description. Luthor murmured. The lowest platform belongs to non-Valdorian guests. It's where my parents and I watched the trials from. I wonder if they are watching me right now. Description. Luthor paused. I'm glad I could see my parents. Description. Luthor scanned the arena and smiled. There's 20 of us tonight, but at least the arena has lots of space.
Hold on, guys. I don't know what's going on here.
Depending on the challenges, I could potentially avoid encountering others just by dodging and running around.
I don't know why it's doing that.
Description. Valdor phased in above the participants. Description. Valdor raised his wrist, his Valdorian tattoo, and said, first and foremost, all hail our beloved King Janus Valdor, the son of King Ryle Valdor, descendant of the first mage, and the one true king of Valencia. Praise the first and all hail his bloodline. Description. The chant, his blood blesses us. YouTube. Now. Description. The chant, his blood blesses us, can be heard roaring from all the platforms. Description. Luthor tilted his head upwards. Supposedly, Janus watches from the highest platform. Does he know I'm down here? Description. Luthor narrowed his eyes, noticing a shiny ball hovering high above the arena and platforms. Model 1. Description. He sighed and murmured. Go away. Don't do anything stupid. Model 1. Description. Valdor opened up his arms and said, Welcome, honored masters of our land, Bronavasker of fire, Imber frost of water, Toka Tenra river, Millicreed of wind, Finorian of lightning, Portia del Rose of illusion, Egoldwell of light, and Lotto sanguine of dark. Welcome to description, the second highest platform. Description. Valdor opened up his arms
didn't
and
go all
said,
the way.
Welcome, honored masters of our land, Bronavasker of fire, Imber frost of water, Toka Tenra river, Millicreed of wind, Finorian of lightning, Portia del Rose of illusion, Egoldwell of light, and Lotto sanguine of dark. Welcome to Valdor, and I hope you enjoy seeing the displays of magic tonight from mages who aspire to join the ranks of Valdor's Mage Army. YouTube. Now, react.
Oh my gosh, people, stop.
Description.
I'm trying to get this thing here. You know what?
Description.
It's close
The
enough.
second highest platform lit up and 8 figures can be seen standing and towering from above. If only I had a chance to ask one of the masters about Chronos. Description. Valdor said, the first challenge tonight will be Battle of the Flags. Description. Valdor paused and raised his hand. A sheen passed over the barrier surrounding the arena and the murmurs of the audience can no longer be heard. Description. He said, there will be 5 flags and the participants who have a flag when I call the end of the round will advance. Description. Valdor said, when you obtain a flag, you must hold it in your hand. Conceal your flag in any way and you will be disqualified.
Oof.
Description. Valdor said, you may use any spell you have at your disposal. There is a barrier surrounding this arena that will prevent magic from hitting the audience. The barrier is now soundproof as well to lessen the distractions as you fight. Description. Valdor said, but the vision mirrors will be broadcasting everything inside the arena. This is your chance to show us what you have. Description. Valdor said, the additional rules for the first round are. Description. He raised one finger. Description. Valdor said, 1. If you kill someone, even someone that doesn't have a flag, one of the flags will randomly teleport to you. Description. Luthor clenched his fists and murmured. He's encouraging us to target weaker participants. Even if someone wanted to quit and stop fighting, other participants could still go after them. Description. Luthor dug one nail into his palm. My original plan of using the arena size to avoid combat is not going to work well. Even if I managed to get a flag, it could still teleport away from me. Description. He looked at Soul and Scarlet. Soul is paying full attention to Valdor while Scarlet is covering her mouth with one hand and seems to be sweating. Description. Some other participants are looking around nervously. Description. Valdor said, 2. For those that have a flag, killing someone will put a temporary effect on your flag that prevents it from teleporting away. When your flag. Description. Valdor said, 2. For those that have a flag, killing someone will put a temporary effect on your flag that prevents it from teleporting away. When your flag has this effect, it will glow. Description. He said, if all the flags are glowing, then the participants without a flag must try to win a flag from someone that has one. Description. Valdor said, there is no hard time limit for this round. I left it open to give you all enough time to show your potential. Description. He said, but I will call the end of the round when I've seen enough. You never know when the match will end, so don't be without a flag for too long.
Well.
Description. Valdor said, and for the participants, there will be one more surprise that will happen as the round progresses to a certain point. I can get a flag to teleport to me if I'm not willing to kill. That just leaves me with getting a flag before someone else gets to it or taking one from someone who has it. System message. Luthor is waiting. You don't have to explain things to me, Luthor. Concentrate on the fight ahead and good luck. 1 of 4 Luthor, if someone's about to kill you, I hope you have the strength to kill them first. 2 of 4. If the pocket watch says something useful, I'll be sure to tell you, Luthor. 3. Wait. Valdor gets to call when the match ends? That means he could totally rig the match against you. Good luck, Luthor. 4. If Luthor, if someone's about to kill you, I hope you have the strength to kill them first. 2 of 4 responses.
I hate to say that. Well, let's say that.
Luthor, if someone's about. Response. Description. Luthor heard your message. I'm not. Description. Luthor heard your message. He paused before whispering. I'm not going to kill anyone. Description. Luthor clenched his fists. If I kill someone here, just so I could win, just so I could save myself, then I won't be Luthor Timecrest anymore. Description. Valdor said, begin. Description. Valdor phased away and the only vision mirror facing towards the arena broadcasted his face looking down at the participants. Description. 5 flags phased into the arena. Description. Luthor eyed one of the flags that had spun closer to him than the others. Levidos Magnus, like air. Description. Luthor disappeared into a gust of wind and flew towards the nearest flag, grabbing it after he reappeared. Description. He whipped his hand behind him. Levidos Melior Magnus, upstream. Description. With Luthor's spell, gusts of air formed, lifting the sand in the arena, and creating a sandstorm wall that separated and obscured Luthor from the other participants. Description. Luthor turned his head, eyeing something that came flying through his sandstorm. Description. A participant landed in front of Luthor, an icicle spear in his gut. The participant writhed for a bit. Description. Luthor clenched the flag in his hand as the writhing stopped. Description. The sandstorm died down and Luthor saw the source of the spear, a water mage standing across from him holding a flag. Description. Instead of coming at Luthor, the water mage turned in another direction and said, Aquatus Magnus, spit spear. Description: the water mage spat into his hand and the spit changed into an icicle spear. He then tossed it at the back of another participant who wasn't paying attention, impaling her. The flag he held started to glow. Levidos Magnus, like air. Description: Luthor flew to the water mage and knocked him to the ground. Description: the water mage grunted and said, "What gives? I'm not even targeting you, kid." Gravidos Magnus, calcium rich. Description: the bones in Luthor's arm and hand hardened. He punched the water mage hard in the stomach. Description: Luthor grabbed the glowing flag from the water mage's hand. The water mage groaned and said, "Why, you little jerk." Description: the water mage coughed and held his stomach, still reeling from Luthor's punch. He said, "Give me back my flag." Description: Luthor tightly squeezed the two flags in his hands. Description: he frowned as the first flag he had obtained started to phase away, leaving Luthor with just the glowing flag. Description: Luthor surveyed the battle. Two participants fought nearby. Description: one of the participants said, "Gravidos Magnus, rooted limbs." His legs transformed into tree trunks and roots shot out from beneath the other opponent, who managed to dodge. Description: one of the participants
what?
said, "Gravidos Magnus, rooted limbs." His legs transformed into tree trunks and roots shot out from beneath the other opponent, who managed to dodge just in time. The two participants are engrossed in their own battle and not looking at Luthor at all. Description: Luthor looked back at the water mage. "You should pretend to be dead before you get killed." Description: the water mage said, "I'm going to kill you." He spat into his hand, but instead of a long icicle, a small one formed. "I'm guessing your mouth is dry with all this sand and dust." Description: the water mage spat into his hand again, and an even tinier spear formed. Tears started streaming down his face. He said, "Please give me back my flag. I can't lose now. I just killed two people." "What's your name?" Description: the water mage sniffled and said, "Morka. My wife's having our first child. She says I'm ellipsis." Description: Morka's voice dropped off for a bit before he said, "My wife says I'm a loser and she wants to leave me. She's wrong. I'm going to give my child a good life. Try to move yourself to the edge, Morka, and pretend to be dead. You can't give anyone a good life if you get killed tonight." Description: Morka screamed and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm not a loser." Description: he aimed the tiny icicle spear in his hand at Luthor's neck. Description: Luthor blocked with his arm. The spear pierced through Luthor's skin, but shattered as soon as it hit Luthor's hardened bones. Description: Luthor punched Morka, knocking him out.
Oof.
"Okay, maybe I can get through tonight without any bloodshed." Description: Luthor looked up at Valdor's face in a vision mirror floating above the arena. Valdor is watching intently. Description: Luthor sighed as he looked down at Morka's unconscious body, sprawled white on the sand. Description: Luthor grabbed Morka's ankles and started pulling his opponent towards the edge of the arena. Description: he heard Scarlet's voice nearby, as she said, "Soul, I got someone's flag." Description: Soul ran towards a participant who had just morphed his legs into tree trunks, paying no heed to his sister. He shouted, "Incendiatos Magnus, flamethrower." Description: the participant looked over his shoulder, an expression of fear spreading across his face as he saw Soul. He tried to move, but his tree trunk legs rooted him to the ground, preventing quick maneuvering. Description: fire spewed out of Soul's hand wildly at the participant with tree trunk legs. Description: Luthor narrowed his eyes at Soul, who had his eyes closed as he lit the participant's legs on fire. Description: the participant howled in pain as the fire spread up his tree trunk legs. His legs. Description: the participant howled in pain as the fire spread up his tree trunk legs. His legs started to morph back, but Soul's fire spread and the participant dropped to the ground, rolling and screaming. Description: Soul looked on, stunned at the sight of what he had just done. Description: Scarlet trembled and said, "Soul, what did you just do? We already have a flag." Description: Soul looked angry as he shouted at Scarlet, "What am I trying to do? What kind of question is that? We both need a flag. Since you have a flag, go kill someone now, Scar." Description: Scarlet clutched her flag and froze. Description: the participant with the tree trunk legs continued to scream in pain in the fire. Description: Soul fell to his knees and covered his ears as his opponent continued to burn in front of him. Description: Luthor lowered his gaze and took a deep breath before continuing to drag Morka away. Description: several boulders formed above Scarlet's head. She continued to stand under a boulder as it formed. System message: Luthor is with Scarlet's in trouble. Luthor, one of two say nothing. Scarlet's in trouble. Scarlet's in trouble. Luthor, one of two responses. YouTube, now, what? Responded, Scarlet. Description: Luthor turned his head to where he last saw Scarlet. Description: the boulders continued to form over her head. Description: Luthor let go of Morka's ankles. Levidos Magnus, like air. Description: Luthor transformed into a gust of air and rushed towards Scarlet as the boulders began to fall. Description: as Luthor reached Scarlet, Soul also came barreling at her, and together, Luthor and Soul pushed her out of harm's way. Description: one boulder crashed to the ground where Scarlet stood. As soon as the boulder hit the ground, Scarlet covered her mouth. Description: Soul scowled as he and Luthor both pulled Scarlet by different arms, avoiding the rest of the falling boulders. Description: Luthor and Soul let go of Scarlet and scanned the arena for the mage who cast the boulders, but couldn't see anyone in sight.
I have a feeling that was High Mage Val whatever. that name is.
Description, Soul shook his fist in the air angrily as he shouted, "Are you picking on my sister because she's blind? I'm going to get you if you come near Scarlet again." Description, Scarlet leaned towards Luthor and whispered, "Thank you, Luthor, ellipsis." Description, Soul turned to Scarlet and frowned when he saw her close to Luthor. He pointed at Luthor and said, "You, stay away from my sister too." Description, Scarlet said, "Soul, ellipsis, Luthor just tried to save me." Description, Soul pointed one thumb at his chest and said, "I saved you, Scar. I didn't need Luthor." Description, Scarlet paused for a moment and said, "You're my hero, Soul. Thank you." Description, Soul seemed pleased as he turned his attention back to Luthor and smirked. His smirk faded as he laid eyes on the glowing flag in Luthor's hand. Description, he crossed his arms and said, "I guess you were all talk, Luthor. You still killed when you had to." "I didn't kill anyone. I took this flag from someone when it was already glowing." Description, Soul's eyes widened and said, "Wait, the glow still lasts even if we are not the ones who killed someone for it?" "It worked for me, but I suppose it's harder to take away a glowing flag since it most likely means that participant killed someone else." Description, Soul tore at his hair, pulling some of it out with his hand as he said, "The High Mage should have told us that more clearly." Description, he gulped and looked scared for a moment. He squeezed his eyes shut for a bit before he turned his head towards the spot where he set the participant with tree legs on fire. Description, he saw the charred remains of a person and dropped to his knees, digging his hands into the sand and shaking uncontrollably. He said, "It's not fair. If I had known we could take away someone else's glowing flag, I would have done that." Description, Scarlet rushed to her brother and embraced him. Description, Soul's eyes widened as the flag from his sister's hand teleported into his. Description, he broke away from Scarlet's embrace and said, "I told you to kill someone, Scar. Now we still only have one flag between us. This is your fault." Description, Soul turned again to Luthor and said, "Give me your flag, Luthor. You didn't kill anyone. You don't deserve to be here." Levidos. Description, the flag in Soul's hand flew up into the air. Levidos Magnus, like air. Description, Luthor changed into a gust of air and blew the floating flag away from Soul and Scarlet. Description, Luthor caught the flag when he changed back, getting his flag count up to 2 again. Description, Soul's mouth dropped open. He tore at his hair again and shouted, "I'm going to kill you, Luthor Timecrest."
Jeez.
Description, Scarlet ran in between Luthor and Soul and said, "No, Soul, Luthor is Miss Lena's son." Description, Soul pushed Scarlet out of the way and said, "So what? Miss Lena, Reed, Timecrest, whatever her name is now, she's just a no-good traitor that left us. I'm going to kill her son to pay her back for hurting us."
Dude.
Description, Scarlet looked horrified, but she didn't stop Soul as he charged past her towards Luthor. Description, Soul said, "Incendiatos Magnus, flamethrower." Description, fire started spewing from Soul's hand. Levidos. Description, 2 other participants, a man and a woman, ran in between Luthor and Soul. Description, the woman, with long braided hair, pointed her arm at Soul and said, "Levidos Melior Magnus, lacerating gale." Description, after a while, cuts appeared on the woman's arm as slices of wind ejected from her arm. Description, Soul screamed as he got blown back, most of his top shredding off, and numerous bleeding cuts appearing on his body. Description, the man, who had his hair tied back in a short ponytail, looked at Luthor and said, "Praise the first, we finally found you in this giant dust bowl, Luthor, name's Tristan." Description, he looked at the woman who attacked Soul and smiled before saying, "My ambitious, amazing and lovely girlfriend is called Amelia." Description, Amelia said, "Are you okay, Luthor?" Description, Luthor looked at Amelia's bleeding arm and the flag in her other hand. "Why did you hurt yourself to defend me?" Description, Amelia said, "Tristan and I have family and friends who are training to participate in these trials as we speak." Description, Amelia said, "We can keep them safe if we help you win." Description, Tristan said, "I entered because of Amelia, so I'm doing whatever she wants." Description, Tristan picked up Amelia's injured arm. He said, "Fleur." Description, Amelia said, "Wait, Tristan, my arm is fine. I'm used to firing off more spells before it starts bothering me." Description, Tristan smiled before he said, "Fleur Magnus, absorb pain." Description, Amelia shook her head as the cuts disappeared from her arm and appeared on Tristan's arm. The wounds, a fleur-based description.
Wait, what?
Amelia shook her head as the cuts disappeared from her arm and appeared on Tristan's arm. The wounds that appeared on Tristan's arm looked less severe than they were on Amelia's arm. A fleur-based spell. Not many people know one of those these days since the Emerald Dragons have died out. How did you learn it? Description, Tristan smiled and said, "I sort of inherited this one. A lot of my ancestors were healers apparently." Description, Tristan said, "I wish fleur spells could be leveled up like regular spells, but I'm still grateful for the one I have. I think the main reason Valdor gave me a chance to participate in these trials is because I have a rare spell." Description, Amelia sighed as she looked at the wounds on Tristan's arm. She said, "Even if your spells lessen the severity of the wounds that are transferred to you, I don't like it when you get hurt." Tristan, Instagram. Description, Tristan said, "You're the only one I would use this spell on, Amelia." Description, Luthor looked away as they kissed. System message, Luthor is waiting. Why can't fleur spells be leveled up like regular spells? 1 of 4 response. What about Morka, Luthor? You should watch Amelia and Tristan kiss, Luthor. Might learn something. 3 of 4 response. Say nothing.
What?
What about Morka, Luthor? 2 of 4 Why can't flare spells be leveled up like regular spells? 1 of 4 responses. Button. Why can't flare spells be leveled up like regular spells? Description. Luthor murmured. Flare spells come from emerald dragons and don't behave like other elemental magic where you can level up by entering trances. Someone with a lower level flare spell is stuck at that level. But I read you can be lucky and draw a flare spell that is already very high level, which means you would have powerful magic without having to put in much effort. Though I'm sure it wasn't easy to get a dragon, when they were alive, to stay still long enough for a spell to be drawn. Too bad it didn't deter people from hunting dragons in hopes to get lucky. It's very interesting you can inherit flare spells too. Description. Luthor's eyes lit up. There's still so much about magic that we don't know and so much of this world that I want to make sense of. Description. Soul shouted. Luthor, you coward, are you going to hide behind other people? Fight me man to man. Description. Luthor looked over in Soul's direction. Scarlet helped Soul to his feet. She looked worried as Soul's wounds bled over her hand. Description. Amelia glanced at Luthor's glowing flag. She said, "Did you kill someone, Luthor?" "No, the flag was already glowing when I took it." Description. Amelia nodded and held out her hand holding the flag. She said, "Good. I'm going to kill the boy who wants to fight you and get the enchantment for this flag. Then I'm going to give it to you." Description. Tristan said with a solemn expression, "It was good that you managed to get a glowing flag, Luthor. Amelia and I saw a lot of flags transferring hands when we were trying to find you, but I think the participants have thinned out a lot by now." Description. Soul shouted, "Are you going to hide behind those 2 jerks the whole night, Luthor?" Description. Amelia raised her arm towards Soul. Description. Luthor dashed in front of her. "Don't kill him." Description. Amelia paused before she said, "I can't really control how much damage my magic does, even to my own arm. Besides, once your flag stops glowing, we could lose both our flags if I don't kill someone now." Description. Tristan said, "I know you don't want to kill Luthor, but Amelia is offering to do it for you. You should be thanking her for getting rid of the boy who's dead set on killing you." Description. Luthor sighed and looked up at all the vision mirrors. "We can see what the vision mirrors are broadcasting, but I'm sure they are showing participants who are fighting and dying. Those 2 with the red hair mean a lot to someone I love. I know she would be heartbroken if she witnesses one, or both, of them die in front of her." Description. Tristan looked at Luthor. Description. Tristan nodded with a sigh and said, "I get it. I understand not wanting to cause someone you love any sadness." Description. The glow from Luthor's flag faded. Description. Luthor still held 2 flags. Amelia held 1. Description. Amelia frowned and said, "Any one of our flags could teleport away at any moment now. We need to get you another glowing flag somehow, Luthor." Description. Tristan looked up at the vision mirror broadcasting Valdor. "The High Mage is stroking his chin." Description. Tristan said, "The High Mage is stroking his chin. I really hope that's a sign he's going to call the end of the match." Description. Luthor turned to Amelia. "Let's go find other participants. I got flags without killing people and I can do it again. You and Tristan can watch my back." Description. Amelia nodded in agreement. Description. Tristan said, "Or, the High Mage could call the end of the match." Description. Tristan's shoulders slumped when his wish didn't come true. He kicked the sand and said, "Hasn't he seen enough?" Description. Scarlet is running towards Luthor. Description. Amelia pushed Luthor out of the way as she pointed her arm at Scarlet, who continued to charge forward. Amelia said, "Lavados Melior." Description. Luthor grabbed onto Amelia's arm and pushed it upwards. Description. Amelia said, "What are you doing, Luthor? That girl is trying to attack you." "I don't care. I'm not going to let them be killed." Description. Scarlet neared and said, "Incendiatos Magnus, precision point." Description. The tip of Scarlet's finger began to steam and glow more brilliantly than the rest of her hand. Description. She avoided hitting Luthor while she directed her finger at Amelia's hand that held a flag. Description. Amelia screamed as Scarlet poked a bloody hole into her hand. Scarlet pulled up the flag in Amelia's hand. Description. Tristan said, "Amelia." Description. Tristan charged at Scarlet from behind, but Scarlet quickly turned around, sensing someone coming and poked her finger at his shoulder, creating a bloody hole. Description. Tristan covered his shoulder and yelped in pain. Description. Soul said, "Scar, hit Luthor, take that jerk's flag." Description. Scarlet aimed for Amelia again. Description. Scarlet aimed for Amelia again. Amelia pointed her arm at Scarlet. Description. Luthor grabbed onto Scarlet and said, "Gravados summitus, calcium pour." Description. Scarlet's legs instantly broke. Soul looked horrified as his sister screamed and crumpled to the ground. Description. Luthor looked at Amelia. "I'll disable Soul and Scarlet from fighting us, but we need to get them to a safe spot so they don't get killed." Description. Amelia blinked and lowered her arm. She swallowed hard and said, "You have a summitus level spell."
Whew, this is getting intense.
Description. Tristan still groaned in pain, but he made his way to Amelia and examined her hand. Description. Tristan started making his way to Scarlet. Amelia raised her hand and stopped him. "What are you thinking of doing, Tristan?" Description. Tristan looked at Luthor and shook his hand. He said, "I want to stomp on that girl's hand for hurting Amelia." Description. Amelia said, "Leave her be. She's not fighting back anymore. Besides, she's already in a lot of pain." Description, Tristan closed his eyes for a moment before he said, fine. If that's what you want, Leah. Description, Tristan snarled at Luthor before he said, and you, Luthor, apologize to Amelia now. Description, Luthor looked at Amelia. Hey Amelia, I'm sorry that my actions got you hurt. Description, Amelia smiled and said, it's okay. I understand. If my spell had hit a girl as close as she was, it would have done some serious damage, maybe even killed her right there. Description, Luthor knelt beside Scarlet. I can't let you take my flags, Scarlet. I'll repair your bones after Valdor calls the end of this round. Description, Tristan said, say, Luthor, how old are you? 13. Description, Tristan's eyes widened as he said, whoa, that's young. Given how good your spells are, I thought maybe you only look young. Description, Tristan shook his head and said, you're certainly the youngest person I met to have a Summitus level spell. Heck, you're the only person that I met who has a Summitus spell unless maybe High Mage Valdor knows one. What does your Summitus spell do, Luthor? I can make someone's bones stronger, heavier or more brittle if I touch them. But I can only manipulate a certain set of bones in the body right now, arms, legs and skull. I avoid the skull. Description, Amelia arched her brow and said, you could easily kill someone with a skill like that. Description, Luthor clenched his fists. Description, Soul came charging at Luthor as he shouted, what did you do to my sister? Levidos Magnus, light air. Description, Luthor faded into a gust of air, appearing behind Soul. Gravidos Summitus, calcium core. Description, Soul's legs broke and he went down hollering all sorts of obscenities. Description, Amelia and Tristan watched in awe of Luthor's combo. Description, Tristan shook his head and said, Levidos and Gravidos. It's amazing you have pretty high level spells in 2 elements. Description, Tristan said, just who are you, Luthor Timecrest?
A person.
Description, Soul quaffed and said, he's just a nobody I'm going to beat. Soul pushed himself up from the sand and said, Solignus. That's the name you should remember. Description, sand clung to the wounds on Soul's body. He raised his hand at Luthor and said, Incendiatos Magnus, flamethrower. Description, after a short delay, tiny flames sputtered out of his hand. Soul quaffed uncontrollably before collapsing face first into the sand. Description, Scarlet groaned as she propped herself up and said, brother, you're at your limit. Please don't hurt yourself more. Let's just stop. It's not worth it, ellipsis.
Hello? Someone came in.
Description, her hands started glowing and Scarlet tried to shift her body towards Soul, but Winston's pain washed over her again.
Oof.
Description, Scarlet passed out.
This is intense.
Description, Soul said into the sand, I am going to kill you, Luthor. I'm going. Description, Soul said into the sand, I am going to kill you, Luthor. I'm going to kill you all and win. Description, Amelia looked down at Soul and said, your sister is right. You look like you're at death's door. Just give up. Description, Soul looked up at Amelia and spat at her. He said, I'm going to beat you up after I get flags for me and my sister from that nobody who thinks he's better than all of us. Description, Amelia said, you sure you don't want me to kill this one, Luthor? We need to take these two to the edge of the arena and make them look dead. Description, Amelia took another look at Scarlet and Soul and said, that shouldn't be hard. They both look pretty dead already. Description, Soul propped himself up with his arms and said, screw you, Luthor. The only things I need from you are those 2 flags you have. Description, Luthor frowned as Soul continued to struggle to get up. Description, the muscles in Soul's arms flexed, and his teeth clamped over his bottom lip as he pushed himself up. Everyone else looked on in surprise as Soul stood on his fractured legs. Description, Soul, his voice hoarse and cracking, said, you took away Miss Lena. Description, he glared at Luthor and said, you hurt my sister. Description, Soul said, at least have the courage to fight me instead of hiding behind other people. Description, Soul took a few steps towards Luthor before he collapsed face first into the sand again. He quaffed and started crawling his way to Luthor. System message, Luthor is waiting. I hate that Soul is coming after you. I wouldn't think less of you if you asked Amelia to get rid of him for you. Anyway, whatever you decide, I'm on your side. 1 of 3 response. I didn't think you were going to break Scarlet and Soul's legs. Don't you think that's a bit too drastic? Scarlet wasn't even trying to hit you. 2 of 3 say nothing. 3, I hate that Soul is coming after you. I wouldn't think less of you if you asked Amelia to get rid of him for you. Anyway, whatever you decide, I'm on. I hate that Soul is coming after you.
I don't know what to pick.
Responded. Description, Luthor murmured. The Ignis siblings still mean something to my mom. And I just broke both their legs and caused them a lot of pain. Description, Luthor shook his head. Description, Luthor looked down at his flags. They both teleported away, leaving his clenched fists empty. Description, Luthor's eyes shot up to the vision mirror broadcasting Valdor. He is smiling, but continues to watch on. Description, Luthor squeezed his empty fists. I need a flag fast. Description, 2 females dressed in armor approached the group. Description, Tristan gulped when he saw them and said, what are you 2 Valdorian mages doing here? Description, one of the Valdorian mages, with blonde hair tied back in a ponytail, said, you weren't paying attention? High Mage Valdor mentioned there would be a surprise. What a surprise. My name is Beatrix of the Valdorian Mage Army, copper rank. Description, Luthor frowned as he saw 4 glowing flags in Beatrix's hand. Description, Beatrix glanced at the group and eyed the one flag in Amelia's hand. Description, Beatrix looked at Amelia and said, make it easy on yourself and, if you're already... Description, Beatrix looked at Amelia and said, make it easy on yourself and just give me your flag. If you're already part of the Valdorian army, you're not here just to take the flag. You're here to kill all of us. Description, Beatrix said, we're a crucial part of the test. If none of you can beat 2 lowest ranked mages in the Valdorian army, then you don't deserve to be in it. Description, Amelia and Tristan both looked bitterly at Beatrix and her partner.
Ooh, this is crazy.
Amelia and Tristan both looked bitterly at Beatrix and her partner. Description, with great effort, Sol attempted to shift his body so he could see the 2 Valdorian mages better. Description, Luthor inched closer to the Valdorian mages. Description, standing next to Beatrix, her partner is clasping her hands tightly together and focusing her gaze exclusively at the ground. Her skin is glistening with sweat and her short, dark hair is matted down. Description, Beatrix put one arm around her partner and said, come on, Keely. I need you. These 5 are the last participants left. Just remember what I said. Close your eyes and imagine the audience as Muffies and I'll do the rest. Description, Keely gulped and said, Muffies, ellipsis, yeah. I'm not scared of what Muffies think of me. Muffies can't think at all. That's why they keep running into things. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and pressed her hand against her heart and took several deep breaths. Description, Luthor inched closer to the 2. Description, Beatrix grabbed Keely's arm and the 2 stepped backwards. Description, Luthor inched closer. Description, Beatrix and Keely took another step back. Description, Luthor paused and frowned. You've been observing us. Description, Beatrix smirked and said, especially you, Luthor. Description, she looked past Luthor at Sol, Scarlet, Amelia and Tristan before she said, the spells we've seen from you are quite impressive compared to any other participant here. But don't think you'll get close enough to us to land your combo. Description, Sol shouted, just you watch. I'm going to beat you both. A hacking cough overcame Sol as soon as he shouted that. Description, Beatrix and Keely joined hands. Keely closed her eyes and Beatrix said, duo cast, Incendiatos Melior Magnus, best friend bullets. Description,
What?
Fire bullets formed around Beatrix and Keely and headed straight for Luthor. Levidos Magnus, light air. Description, the bullets passed straight through Luthor as he changed into a gust of air. Description,
Oh,
Luthor
okay.
charged at Beatrix and Keely in winged form, but he changed back before he could reach them. Description, behind him, Luthor could hear Tristan scream, Amelia, watch out. Description, Luthor's eyes widened as Beatrix's face broke into a smile. They're homing bullets. Description, Luthor whirled around as the bullet wave that passed through him, headed towards Amelia. She dropped to the ground and dodged the wave. Description, Luthor shouted, behind you, Amelia, she can control the bullets. Description, Amelia rolled around on the ground and raised her arm in the direction behind her, but Beatrix's smile widened as she had already manipulated the bullets to swerve around and take a dive downwards, hitting Amelia before she could blow them away with her spell. Description, Tristan rushed to Amelia, picking her up in his arms. Description, Tristan caressed her face and said, Amelia, ellipsis. Description, Amelia groaned as a pool of blood formed underneath her. She said, Tristan, run. Save yourself. Description, tears streamed down Tristan's face. He closed his eyes before opening them again and said, don't worry. Everything is going to be okay, my darling. Description, Amelia reached her hand up weakly and covered his mouth, shaking her head slightly. She said, don't say it, ellipsis. Description, he took her hand off his mouth and kissed it before he said, I love you so much, Amelia. Fleur Magnus, absorb pain. Description, Amelia looked on in horror as all the bullet wounds she received started fading and appearing on Tristan. Description, after the transfer completed, Tristan toppled over. Amelia helped him into a lying position and placed his head on her lap. Description, Amelia's hands shook violently as she tried to pressing them over Tristan's bleeding wounds, but there are too many. She said, you idiot. My wounds were too much for you this time, Tristan. Description, Tristan smiled up at Amelia and said, I'm sorry I signed up for the mage trials without telling you. I just wanted to be by your side. Description, a tear trickled down his face as he said, Amelia, I'm afraid, ellipsis. Description, Amelia sobbed and said, don't talk. Just. Description, Tristan stopped moving. Description, Amelia blinked down at Tristan with an expression of shock. She started shaking him as she said, wake up. Wake up. Please, ellipsis. Tristan, you can't be dead. Who am I going to have my evening walks with? Who is going to laugh at my stupid jokes? Description, Luthor swallowed hard as the flag in Amelia's hand teleported away. Description, Beatrix smiled triumphantly as she looked down at the 5 flags in her hand. Description, she pumped her fist holding all 5 flags into the air and looked up at the vision mirror broadcasting Valdor. Description, Valdor continued to watch without ending the match. Beatrix furrowed her brows. Description, Beatrix glanced over at Luthor and said, I guess the High Mage really does want us to kill all of you. That's too bad. I don't like hurting kids, Luthor, but I love my job in the army. Description, Luthor squeezed his eyes shut. After a moment, he opened them and looked at Keely. Hey, Keely. The vision mirrors are all broadcasting you right now. Description, Keely didn't respond, but her eyelids squeezed tighter. Description, Beatrix said, don't listen to him, Keely. He's lying. Remember, all the vision mirrors are facing the audience so Luthor can't even see what they are broadcasting. You said we were the only participants left. What else could they be broadcasting? Description, Keely gulped and her lips began to tremble. Description, Beatrix squeezed Keely's hand and said, shut up, you, duo cast, Incendiatos Melior Magnus, best friend bullets. Description, fire bullets formed around Beatrix and Keely, but instead of shooting out towards Luthor, the bullets dispersed in random directions, hitting nothing. Description, Beatrix frowned and said, Keely, concentrate, we're going to be kicked out of the army if we lose. All your superiors are watching your performance right now, Keely. High Mage Val louder. Description, Keely trembled harder. Description, Beatrix said, shut up, Luthor Timecrest, you're lucky the High Mage hasn't called the end of the match yet. Description, Beatrix squeezed Keely's hand and said, Keely, don't listen to him. Remember, Muffies. The audience are nothing more than Muffies. Description, Luthor dug his nail into his palm. King Janus is watching. Description, Soul shouted, yeah, and you have a giant nose hair, Keely, if I can see it. Imagine what it looks like to King Janus magnified by the vision mirrors. Description, Keely squealed and her eyes popped open. She tore her hand away from Beatrix and covered her nose, her face bright red. Description, Amelia kissed Tristan, setting him down gently before she rose and pointed her arm at Beatrix and Keely. She said, Levidos Melior Magnus, lacerating gale. Levidos Magnus, light air. Description, Luthor changed into a gust of wind and closed the distance between him and the Valdorian mages. Description, Amelia's gale soared towards them. Beatrix grunted as she pushed Keely to the ground and then dashed away herself to avoid Amelia's attack. Description, Beatrix turned to her partner and yelled, Keely, move. Levidos Magnus, light air. Description, Luthor appeared behind Keely and touched her. Gravidos Summitus, calcium poor. Description, Keely screamed as her arms broke. Description, Amelia walked towards Beatrix and said, good job, Luthor. Thanks to you, I can get my revenge. Description, Soul said, what? That was all me. Didn't you hear me call out that woman's nose hair? She fell for it too. Description, Luthor looked at Amelia.
No.
Amelia, I'm sorry about Tristan. If you two hadn't helped me, ellipsis. Description, Amelia stopped walking. She paused before she said, you know those two would have come after us anyways. Description, she burst into tears. Description, she covered her mouth and tried to suppress her sobs, but it was no use. Through her sobs she said, I wish Tristan didn't see me crying before he died. It always made him sad when I cried. Description, Luthor opened his mouth, but closed it again. Tell Amelia that Tristan seemed like a really nice person and
Whoops.
that Description, Luthor opened his mouth, but closed it again. He shook his head. Description, she covered her mouth and tried to suppress her sobs, but it was no use. Through Description, Luthor opened his mouth, but closed it again. He shook his head as he dug one nail into his palm. This isn't. Tell Amelia that Tristan seemed like a really nice person and that you're grateful for his help. 2 of 3. This isn't your fault, Luthor. Amelia and Tristan chose to be in these trials. They knew the risks. 1 of 3 say nothing. Tell Amelia that Tristan seemed like a really nice person and that you're great. This isn't your fault. This isn't your fault, Luthor. Response. Description, Luthor took a deep breath and nodded. Description, he murmured. I know I just met them. It's just hard to watch. Description, Luthor paused. But thanks for your words. Description, Amelia continued. Description, Amelia continued to advance towards Beatrix. Description, Beatrix looks panicked. She said, Keely, hurry up. Come to me or that woman is going to kill me. Description, Keely whimpered in pain and made no move toward Beatrix. Description, Beatrix said, Keely, come to me. Description, Amelia said, does it matter? Your partner's arms are busted. Description, Beatrix held up her hand and said, wait. Description, she eyed the 5 flags in her hand. Only 2 flags glowed. Description, Beatrix held out one of the glowing flags towards Amelia and said, take this. You can advance to the next round. Description, Amelia eyed the flag and took it. Description, Beatrix smiled and said, let's work together. If we kill the rest, the spot in the Valdorian army is yours for sure, Amelia. The pay is really good. Description, Amelia pointed her arm at Beatrix's face. Description, Beatrix said, what are you doing? I gave you a flag. Description, Amelia said, the only reason I would want a spot in the Valdorian army now is so I could get close to you to kill you, but I already have that chance now. Description, Beatrix started to back away from Amelia as she said, you're crazy. You're not thinking clearly. You could win if you just stop. Description, Amelia said, I bet the reason High Mage Valdor didn't call the end of the round when you have all 5 flags is because he wants you to die too. Description, Beatrix shook her head and said, that's not true. Description, Amelia said, you know what makes me sick? I'm probably doing Valdor a favor by killing the 2 of you. Levidos Melior Magnus, lacerating gale. Description, Beatrix's expression turned to horror as she tried to run, her legs trembling and clumsy. Amelia's point-blank shot caught up with her quickly, tearing Beatrix's back to shreds. Description, Keely looked horrified as Beatrix fell over. She screamed, dropped to her knees and squeezed her eyes shut. Description, Amelia walked over to Luthor and held out her glowing flag. Description, she said, I wish Tristan and I met you before we entered these wretched trials. Maybe, ellipsis, maybe if you and Tristan worked together, you two could have convinced my stubborn head out of it. Description, Amelia pressed the glowing flag in Luthor's hand as she said, win, Luthor, so no one else has to die in these wretched trials. Description, Beatrix writhed a little before she tried to crawl away. Amelia walked back and pointed her already torn and bleeding arm at Beatrix's head. Description, Luthor turned his head away as he heard Amelia say, Levidos Melior Magnus, lacerating gale. Description, 1 flag from Beatrix's hand teleported into Amelia's. Amelia tossed it to the ground and spat on it. Description, Soul eyed the flag and crawled towards it, wincing with each movement. Description, Amelia kicked the flag further away from Soul. Description, Soul shouted, you witch. Description,
Whoa!
Scarlet grunted in the distance as she woke up. Description, Soul said, Scarlet, use your summonist spell. Hurry. Description, Scarlet's hands and feet started glowing red as she gulped and said, what happened, Soul? Are you okay? Description, Soul said, use your summonist spell now. Description, Scarlet said, I can't. And no. Description, Soul said, there's no time, Scarlet. What if the trial ends? We have no flags, use Fatal Fever now. Description, Amelia, making her way toward Keeley, stopped and turned to Scarlet. She said, Luthor, that boy is claiming his sister has a summonist spell. I'm not going to let you kill them no matter what, Amelia. Description, Amelia looked at Luthor with hesitation. Description, Soul said, Scarlet, you promised me. You promised you would do anything to help me win. Description, Soul paused. Description, he shouted, I need your help, Scar. Description, Scarlet clutched her chest, an indescribable expression of torture on her face. Description, Scarlet screamed as she dug both her feet and her hands into the sand, as deep as she could get her broken legs to go. Description, Scarlet said, Incendiatos summitus, Fatal Fever. Description, she said, Luthor, run. Description, a large radius around Scarlet glowed blue. All bodies alive or dead inside this radius glowed blue as well. Description, Soul said, die, Luthor, Incendiatos Melior Magnus, heaped armor. Description, Luthor is shivering and glowing blue too. Amelia fell to the ground in the distance. Description, Luthor turned to Scarlet, his movements incredibly slow. Levidos Magnus, up. Description, Soul, who had been limping towards Luthor all this time, let out a battle cry and lunged. Soul punched Luthor before he could cast upstream and the two rolled in the sand. Soul howled in pain as his broken legs bent in an awkward angle. Description, Soul collapsed on top of Luthor and said, now you die, Luthor. Description, Luthor began to freeze solid. His eyelids drooped closed. He tried to push Soul off of him, but didn't have enough strength. Scarlet, stop this. You don't want to do this. Description, Luthor's words came out barely a whisper. Description, Soul laughed on top of him and said, did you say something, Luthor? Description, with a triumphant expression, Soul said, just so you know, she can't stop this spell once it's begun. Scarlet will suck away everyone's body heat before you all burn. Description, a translucent red sphere appeared in front of Scarlet, lighting up her tear-streaked face. Description, Soul rolled off of Luthor with a smile and said, I don't want to become your cover for this. Description, the translucent red sphere expanded around Scarlet, setting all the bodies it glided over on fire. Description, the sphere expanded to encompass Soul, but as it lit Soul on fire, Soul just smiled as if he didn't seem to mind. Description, the sphere is about to reach Luthor. Description, Luthor's breathing slowed and he couldn't move. A round object appeared between him and the expanding sphere. Model 1. Description, a gelatinous substance surrounded Model 1 that molded into a humanoid shape. No, that was you up in the sky. Model 1, don't, everyone's watching, ellipsis, just go away, ellipsis. Description, Model 1 picked up Luthor and ran with Luthor towards the edge of the arena. Description, the sphere set Amelia and Keeley on fire. Description, Morphe's lifeless form became engulfed in flame in the distance. Description, soon 3 flags teleported into Scarlet's hand. Description, the vision mirror broadcasting Valdor went blank as he phased above the arena. Description, Scarlet groaned as she crawled her way to Soul, her legs leaving a trail of blood. Description, she neared Soul and held out a flag to him. Her brother paid her no heed as he continued to look at Luthor. Description, Soul said, he got away, that coward got away. He groaned and passed out. Description, Scarlet said, Soul. She pressed the flag into her brother's hand. Description, Valdor said, this round is over. Description, Scarlet inhaled deeply. Description, the air is heavy from all of the burning bodies. She covered her nose and hurled before passing out. Description, Model 1 set Luthor on the ground and shielded him from the side of the arena. Luthor looked stunned and horrified. System message, Luthor is no, Luthor, are you okay? Cover your nose and block out the smell. 1 of 3 respond. I think Morta is dead. Luthor, say nothing. No, Luthor, no, Luthor, are you okay? Cover your nose and block out the smell. 1 of respond. Description, Luthor still looked stunned, but he covered his nose and mouth with his hand. Description, he squeezed his face harshly with his hand. Description, Luthor glanced behind him. Description, Luthor glanced behind him. His parents are both pressing themselves against the barrier that separates the viewing platforms from the arena. Description, Julius is watching Luthor with great sadness as he held a crying Ash. The viewing platform is still a distance above him, but Luthor could hear Ash's wailing in his head. Description, Helena pounded on the barrier, tears streaking down her face. Her mouth moved, but Luthor couldn't make out what his mom was saying. Description, Luthor looked up at Model 1, who hovered over Luthor protectively. Description, Luthor is recovering from Scarlet's spell. Why did you do that, Model 1? They are going to take you away. Description, Model 1 said, I can't let you die, Luthor. Besides, now you don't have to worry about shutting me down. Description, Luthor's eyes widened and he shook his head. Description, Valdor teleported behind Model 1. He raised his hand at Model 1. Run, Model 1. I order you to run away. Wait, please don't take Model 1 away. Description, Valdor said, you were only permitted to keep a basic model, with only companion mode and nothing more. This robot is equipped with advanced technology. I got the gelatin from the Aura portal. Valdorian soldiers let me keep it. Description, Valdor frowned and said, then the soldiers who let you keep this shall be punished. Description, Valdor said, besides, this robot clearly has disobeyed your orders. You told it to run, yet it is still here. What kind of advanced modifications did you give this robot, Luthor? Whatever they are, they allowed this robot to get inside the arena without being detected. You think I'm going to let you keep something like this? Description, Luthor swallowed hard. Description: Model 1 placed one gelatinous hand on Luthor's head and said, I feel so good that you activated the pocket watch, Luthor. You have a real friend to talk to now instead of just some robot who doesn't make you happy. Description: Model 1 said, I'm sorry, Luthor, for disobeying you again. Description: Model 1 started phasing away. Luthor grabbed for Model 1, but his hands passed through as Model 1 disappeared. I do consider you a friend, Model 1. You are my only friend. Description: Luthor lunged at Valdor. Valdor evaded by floating higher. Luthor fell to his knees. Give my friend back, give him back. Description: Valdor said, you will never see that robot again. If I win these trials, you don't have to make future trials safer. Description: Valdor eyed Luthor. You don't. Description: Luthor took a deep breath. You don't have to tell me how I can contact the time manipulator. Description: Luthor looked up at Valdor. Just give me back Model 1. Description: Valdor paused before he said, I thought you were smart, Luthor, but how come you still haven't figured out that you've lost already? Description: Luthor held up the glowing flag that Amelia had given him. You said whoever had a flag moves on to the next round. Description: Valdor said, you would have died in the girl's summoned spell if the robot didn't save you. Description: Luthor shook his head. I have a flag. Description: Valdor said, you lost, Luthor Timecrest. Give me back Model 1. Description: Valdor smiled and said, I gave you lots of chances, Luthor.
Yeah, High Mage Valamator, whatever that name
in
is.
front of the participants. I set up the challenge so you could still win without killing. Description: Valdor said, I played fair, at least in this first round. Description: Valdor said, I didn't even call the end of the match when Beatrix had all 5 flags. You didn't call the end of the match because I was still alive, and you want me dead. Description: Valdor said, yes, that outcome would have been more preferable than just being right. And you would be dead as well if the stupid robot hadn't intervened. Model 1. His name is Model 1. He's not a robot. He's my friend. Bring him back so I can tell him that. Description: Valdor said, your robot wouldn't have been taken away if you had just crushed Scarlet Ignis' skull instead of breaking her legs. But I told you that you couldn't win against people who were willing to give up more than you, Luthor. Description: Luthor froze. Description: He said, Soul is a prideful one, but he screamed for his sister's help and that's why he'll move on to the next round. Description: Valdor said, Scarlet didn't want to kill like you, but she went through with it, helping her brother and earning herself a spot in the next round. Description: Luthor clutched the sand as he looked down at the ground, his whole body shaking. Description: Luthor took a few deep breaths and looked up at the second platform. He stood up and cupped his hands around his mouth. Masters, I'm close to contacting time manipulator Chronos, the first human to come to Alincia. Description: Luthor took out the pocket watch and waved it above his head. I have Chronos' pocket watch. Please help me. Description: Valdor said, all the vision mirrors are off right now. No one can hear you in from all the way down here. You just look like an insignificant speck. Description: Luthor's hands felt on his sides. Description: Valdor looked somber as he said, from what I saw, you could have easily won this round if you had just killed Scarlet Ignis before she used her summoned spell. I'm sad you lost while you're still alive. Description: Valdor said, but I suppose I saw what I needed. Because my king seems to notice you, I started worrying you might be someone special. Description: Valdor said, but as it turns out, you're not someone I need to be afraid of because you will never reach your goals like this. Description: Luthor sucked in air as if he was suffocating, and clutched his stomach as if he had been punched. You think I want to be like this? Life would be so much easier for me if I just didn't care. If I didn't care about saving my people. If I didn't care about taking someone's life. Description: Luthor's heart is pounding fast. Messages, now, Matthew F. But description, messages, now, but description, Luthor's heart is pounding fast. Description: Luthor's heart is pounding fast. But I'm me. And I do care and I feel horrible when I hurt other people. Does it mean I can't have dreams? Does it mean I can try to live my life the way I want? Description: Valdor paused and lowered himself to the sandy ground. Description: He looked Luthor directly in the eye. No. Description: Valdor said, it just means that this world is not made for you, Luthor Timecrest. Description: Valdor pointed his hand at Luthor and said, you shall be detained until the end of the trials. Description: Someone is phasing in next to Valdor. The High Mage lowered his hand. Description: Luthor stared blankly at the ground. System message: Luthor is wait. Don't listen to Valdor. Luthor, you'll find a way to get what you want. 1 of 2 I'm sorry about Model 1. 2 of 2 responses. Button. Don't listen to Valdor. Luthor, you'll find a way to get what you want. 1 of 2 responses. Button. I'm sorry about Model 1. 2 of 2 responses. Button.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about Model 1. 2 of 2 responses. Messages. A monochrome icon stylized with a meteor. Behind it response. I messed up. Description: A person teleported next to Valdor. Description: Valdor cleared his throat and said, Hi Commander Valdem. What are you doing down here? Description: The High Commander said, King Janet wishes to speak with Luthor Timecrest. Description: High Commander Valdem's stern tone did not match his gentle, almost friendly looking face. Description: High Commander Valdem's stern tone did not match his gentle, almost friendly looking face. Valdem has dark green eyes, brown hair and is wearing armor instead of the red party attire like the rest of the crowd came dressed in. Description: Luthor and Valdor both looked incredulous. Description: Valdor said, the trials aren't over yet. Will the king stay to see the final round? Description: The High Commander said, the king wishes to speak with Luthor Timecrest now. Description: Valdor said, "This boy is my prisoner. He broke the law and hid advanced human technology from us." Description: The High Commander said, "King Janus has ordered for me to take over custody of Luthor Timecrest." Description: Valdor said, "Why does the king care so much about this insignificant boy? Haven't I shown he's nothing special tonight? He's talented with magic for sure, but he's not capable of harming Valdor. King Janus needn't worry about him anymore." Description: The High Commander said, "Luthor's father is an ambassador." Description: Valdor sneered and said, "So? That doesn't make him above our rules." Description: The High Commander said, "When the trials conclude, King Janus wants to speak to you again about why you let Luthor Timecrest enter when your orders are to keep away from the Timecrest family." Description: Valdor cleared his throat again, tightly clasping his hands behind his back with a sour expression on his face. Description: He said, "I explained myself already. I have nothing more I want to say about this insignificant speck." Description: The High Commander said, "Are you planning to make it a habit to disobey our king's orders now, High Mage?" Description: In an acerbic tone, Valdor said, "I am a High Mage of Valdor. I served King Janus' father and his grandfather. The term elder doesn't even begin to do justice to how many years of service I have over you, Sita Valdem. You will not speak to me like that." Description: The High Commander said, "I will tell King Janus that you aren't willing to speak to him." Description: Valdor pressed his lips tightly and said, "No, I will explain again, as many times as needed, that I am nothing but loyal to the Valdorian Empire." Description: Valdor spread his arms out and said, "But haven't I done enough to prove my loyalty to King Janus? Isn't it time he forgave me for advising his father to marry him off? He should understand that I advised what I thought was best for Valdor." Description: The High Commander said, "The audience can't hear us right now, but you are looking rather flustered, High Mage." Description: Rage crossed Valdor's face for a moment, but he retracted his arms, clasping them behind his back. The High Mage turned up his chin and straightened his body into a dignified posture. Description: Messages, now, Description: Valdor said, "He won't talk to me about Luthor Timecrest, but why do I suddenly have the name Time Manipulator Chronos Timecrest in my head? Will King Janus at least tell me that much?" Description: Luthor glanced at Valdor. "You don't know who the Time Manipulator is, High Mage? How did you know I was trying to talk to him then?" Description: Valdor frowned, but ignored Luthor, keeping his gaze only on the High Commander. Speaking volume, speak words, Valdor, Val.
Yeah, Val Elder, or however you say that.
Words.
High Mage Val Elder.
"You don't know who the Time Manipulator is, High Mage? How did you know I was trying?" Description: Valdor frowned, but ignored Luthor, keeping his gaze only on the High Commander. Description: The High Commander stepped in front of Luthor. Description: The High Commander said, "Before I take you to see the king, I need you to hand me the pocket watch." Description: The High Commander said, "Before I take you to see the king, I need you to hand me the pocket watch." Description: Luthor squeezed his hand around the pocket watch. Description: Valdem said, "This is your last chance to find out more about the Time Manipulator." Description: Luthor looked behind Valdem to see his parents. Description: They both had horrified looks and shook their heads. Description: Luthor handed the pocket watch over to Valdem. Description: Valdem paused before taking it. Valdem closed the watch.
Okay, guys, so this part I have to explain what happened because for some reason, this part where Luthor meets with King Janus, I don't know what happened. For some reason, part of that video got deleted. I don't know what happened there. Maybe I accidentally took it out. I don't know what happened, but I'm not going to go through the whole game again and just play it because that's going to take me a while to get to it. So I'll just explain in brief detail what happened. So Luthor got taken to the king, and I don't know, they were talking about the watch and who the first human was, in this case, Chronos, but we also found out what his real name is, Alvin Timecrest. And King Janus was explaining what this watch is and showing him that this watch cannot be destroyed at all. Basically, it's indestructible. So he was showing it by using it on the watch and destroyed it with a dagger, basically. The glass shattered and it just got destroyed. Just poof. So after that, the watch performed, and Luthor was basically saying that King Janus is the evil one, that he is behind the Valdorian disease, and King Janus says, "Okay, good, you think I'm an evil one, then take this dagger and basically kill me." So Luthor basically says, "No, I can't do that," and King Janus basically places the dagger in Luthor's hand and basically forces Luthor to point it basically at King Janus, but Luthor couldn't do it, and it just dropped. And he basically called Luthor a little child because he's such a weakling and he can't even do it, which I think is a little bit overboard. But that basically happened, and then we find out that I think it's Val Elder or Valdem comes in and tells that Riley, King Janus' daughter, is in trouble, and she's been calling from Luthor and basically says, no, I didn't call for you and all that kind of stuff. So now we're going to come over to where we see Riley and Luthor is trying to lower the barrier. So yeah.
System mess 26 minutes 30. Skip timer for 1 skip crystal. You have 7. Skip timer for 1 4,400. The current chapter 12. System description. The wind howled, blowing Luther's hair in the 8 o'clock. Description. 4,000. The current year. iPhone. Wilt and play 440. Description. The current year. 8 o'clock p.m. System mess. Luther. Riley gulped and covered her face with. Description. Riley gulped and covered her face with her hands as she sat in her pool of blood, trembling. System message. Luther. Just wanted to let you know here. Don't let. Red text. Luther. Just wanted to let you know I'm here. Don't let Riley die. 1 of 3 response. Red text person. Why are you doing this to Riley? And would it help if I asked you to stop? 2 of 3. Why did you want Luther to participate in the back button?
All right, let's
Back.
save this.
Load settings button. Setting. There may be suppress. There may be the tech piano load save game button. Save game up. Save button. Game OK button. OK. If music follows cursor is enabled. The Timecrest. Vorail. Research. 1 minute. FaceTime. 80. FaceTime. Now. Continue. Button. Continue. Red text person. What? Luther. Just. Red text person. Why are you doing this to Red text person. Why are you doing? Response. Red message. Description. Your message was received. Red message. Description. Your message was not transmitted to Luther. It's okay, Riley. Everything is. Red message. Description. Your message was received. Red message. Description. I remember you said you wanted to study with a healer. Did you learn anything that could help? Description. Riley shook her head, her face still buried in her hands. Description. Riley mumbled, I want to die. What? Description. Riley lowered her hands, streaking her face with blood. She said, I want to die, Luther. Description. Luther shook his head. Listen to me, Riley. This isn't you talking. Someone has taken control of you and is making you say these things. You need to keep pressure on your wound while I figure out a way to lower this barrier. Description. Riley said, no, this is me. I wanted to kill myself on the day you were quarantined, Luther. Description. Luther's eyes widened. Description. Riley said, on the day you were quarantined, Luther, I came up to the Sovereign Eye to kill myself. Description. Riley's blood continued to spread on the image of the quarantine zone. Description. She said, did you know that my mother refused to have another child with my father to protect me? Description. She said, my mother was afraid that my father would give up on me as soon as she gave him another child who might inherit the Valdorian throne. Description. Riley said, on the day you and your family were quarantined, I came up the Sovereign Eye to jump off and kill myself because both my mother and father's lives and the future of the Valdorian Empire would be better without me. Riley. Maybe you wanted to die back then, but I can't watch you die. Please don't make me watch you die. Description. Riley said, when I was coercing myself to jump, I saw you through the Sovereign Eye. Description. Riley said, you were standing on the rooftop of your building too, and for a moment, I thought you were there to kill yourself like me. Description. She said, I couldn't take my eyes off you. If you jumped, I would have jumped. Description. Riley shook her head. Description. Riley said, but you didn't jump. Description. Riley smiled and said, instead, you looked in the direction of the Valdorian Empire and smiled. From the Sovereign Eye, it seemed like, ellipsis, you were looking at me, ellipsis, it seemed like you were smiling at me.
Aww.
Description. She said, in that moment, I finally felt that I wasn't alone. Description. Riley said, I promised myself that I'll do anything to set you free. Description. Riley bit her bottom lip and tilted her head and looked up at the sky. Then live. You have to live if you're going to set me free. Tell me how to get rid of this barrier. Description. She said, I'm sorry, Luther. I'm weak. Description. Riley said, if I could just make my father happy and inherit the Valdorian throne, then I could actually help humans. Description. She said, but instead of focusing on my studies and getting stronger, all I can think about is the next time I'm going to see you, Luther. Description. Riley said, now my father is considering remarrying and I don't blame him. I can't even protect one boy, let alone a whole empire. Description. Riley dug her hand into her wound. She screamed in pain. Riley. Description. Riley said, someone as weak as me doesn't deserve to be alive.
This is not her talking.
Description. Luther pounded on the barrier. Chronos, if this is you, what do you want? I'll do anything. Leave Riley alone. Description. Riley stood up. She wobbled, but then steadied herself. Description. She said, Luther, I can't even ignore this voice inside my head, ellipsis. Description. She started scratching her arms furiously, before cupping her head with both hands. Description. Riley said, I can ignore this voice in my head, ellipsis, telling me, ellipsis, telling me that I should kill you. Description. Riley continued to scratch her body. She said, Luther, run, get away from me. I can ignore this urge much longer. I want to kill you. I want to push you off this tower and kill you. Description. Luther's hands dropped to his side. So that's it? If that's all that you want, Chronos, then it's fine. I was going to do it anyways. Description, Luthor ran around the red barrier, to the edge of the Sovereign Eye. Lower the barrier around Riley, Chronos, and I'll jump. I promise I'll kill myself. Description, Riley's eyes widened. She continued to scratch herself furiously, but she choked out. Luthor, what are you saying? You can't, don't die, Luthor. Don't worry, Riley. I'm a Timecrest. Even if I die, I think I have the ability to come back to life. Description, Riley shook her head and said, that's crazy talk. No one can come back from the dead. Description, Luthor stood facing Riley and with his back towards the ledge of the eye. He took a step backwards, almost tipping over the edge. Chronos, lower the barrier and I'll jump off. Description, the red barrier around Riley disappeared. Description, Luthor sighed in relief as High Commander Valdor burst forth from the entrance to the top landing of the eye and hurried over to Riley. Description, he nodded at Luthor before seizing Riley into his arms. Riley squirmed and said, let me go, Luthor. System message, Luthor is waiting. Yay, Luthor, you did it. What you said worked. I'm so relieved Riley is okay. One of two look at what Chronos is doing to Riley. Maybe Janice is right about him. Do you really want to talk to the person who hurt Riley like this? Because after this, I don't know if I want to. 2 of 2 responses. Yay, Luthor, you did it. What you said worked. I'm so relieved Riley is okay. 1 of 2 responses. Button.
I think... I don't know which one to pick.
Look at what Chronos is doing to Riley. Maybe Janice is right about him. Do you really want to talk to the person who hurt Riley like this? Because after this, look.
Let's do that one.
Respond. If I have to die to help Riley, I will. Description, Luthor paused. But I also choose to die because I need to speak with Chronos. And if it works, I hope we'll speak to him together. But even if you're not there, this is something I need to do for myself. Description, rain began to fall, mixing with the blood that had been pooling on the eye and spreading it across the images of the quarantine zone. Okay, time to keep my end of the bargain. Description, Luthor turned around and looked over the ledge of the eye. His eyes ran down the length of the tower, taking in its height. Description, Luthor took a deep breath and squeezed the pocket watch. He smiled as the glow of the watch pulsated in the darkness of the storm. Description, Luthor murmured. I told you that the glow of the pocket watch gave me back my life after I killed Lieutenant Zomvalsalri. That wasn't the only time it saved me. On the day I was quarantined, I saw the glow from the pocket watch for the first time. I didn't receive any messages, but the glow still gave me hope that there was something else out there to hope for. The glow made me smile defiantly at Valdor that day. I thought it was the real-time manipulator. But maybe it was you. The same blue glow emanates from the watch when you message me. So maybe you were the one who saved 2 lost kids that day. System message, Luthor is waiting.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's me. At least I hope it was me. 1 of 2 I'm not sure it was me, Luthor. 2 of 2 yeah, that's me. At least I hope it was me. Yeah, that's me. At least I hope it was me. Description, Luthor smiled. I believe it was. Description, Luthor placed the pocket watch in his inner jacket pocket and glanced over his shoulders. Description, Valdor tended to Riley's wound, healing it, as she continued to struggle in his arms. Description, Riley screamed, stop, Luthor. Description, Luthor closed his eyes and stepped off the ledge. Description, a large mechanical bird descended from the sky. Description, the mechanical bird swooped down and caught Luthor on its back. Description, Luthor looked up to see Patora, sitting on the bird's back. You came, but you're a little late. Description, Patora said, I saved your life. I arrived on time. Unless you have information about the time manipulator, I'm dying tonight. Description, Patora said, my orders are to help you. I can take you to my master if you want information. Description, the mechanical bird ascended. I'm going to die tonight, Patora. I already decided. Description, Patora frowned. In an angry tone, she said, don't make me stuff you in a metal box. I don't think you can. I think your solid thoughts can only form one object at a time. If you stuff me in a box, this bird will disappear along with your escape plan. Description, Patora's frown deepened. She said, don't you want to meet my master? You're too late, Patora. Description, the bird ascended past the ledge of the Sovereign Eye. Description, Luthor's eyes widened when he saw Riley, with her body covered in pulsating red veins, standing over Valdem's body. Description, Valdem lay gravely injured beneath her, unconscious.
Wait, what?
Description, Valdem lay gravely injured beneath her, unconscious. You are too late. Description, Patora reached out her hand to Luthor, but it was too late. Description, Luthor jumped off the bird. Description, Patora said, Lucidus Ultimus, solid. Description, before she could finish, Riley shot out a red bolt of lightning that struck Patora and sent her and her bird spiraling down towards the landing of the Sovereign Eye. Description, Luthor's eyes widened as Riley came dashing over the edge of the eye. Description, she smiled at him as she descended rapidly. Description, the red veins faded from her body. Levidos Magnus, upstream. Description, gusts of wind appeared beneath Riley pushing her upwards, but she said, Evalantis. Description, Riley's translucent wings took her around Luthor's spell. Riley, you have to live. You're stronger than I am. My smile faded while yours remained. Fly back up, Riley. Description: Riley flew closer to Luthor before canceling her spell and resuming her flow with him. Chronos, I understand why you orchestrated my participation in the trials. You wanted me to realize I don't just want to talk to you, I need to talk to you. I desire to see what lies beyond this world, and I could do that without your help.
Wait, I don't remember
I
this.
see that now. That's why I jumped. I have no regrets about dying now. There's no need for you to control Riley anymore. Description: Riley said, "This is me, Luthor." No, this isn't you, Riley. You still had the red veins all over your body after you jumped. Description: Riley said, "If you want to die, then I'm going to die with you. Because the reason I smile is you." Description: Riley smiled and said, "I don't want to kill you anymore, Luthor." Ellipsis: I'm so happy those thoughts have left my head. Ellipsis. Description: Tears streamed from Riley's face and blended with the falling rain. She touched her face and said, "Crying when I'm happy feels good." Ellipsis.
Wait,
Riley. Description: Jana's phased next to a falling Riley, catching her. Description: Riley said, "Father?" Description: Jana's froze for a moment. Description: Luthor looked on with surprise as Jana's started dropping with Riley.
wait, what?
Jana's, what are you doing? Vorel, Jana's, what are you doing? Description: Jana's narrowed his eyes at Luthor, seeming to have snapped out of a daze. Description: Luthor smiled as Jana's phased away with Riley. "Thank you, King Jana's." Description: Luthor turned himself around in the air so he is facing the direction of the ground. Description: Luthor pressed his hand on the spot of his jacket where the pocket watch is sitting behind. "Listen, if I don't get a chance to say this, thank you for everything too. You stuck around. And I do feel like I can talk to you." Description: Luthor closed his eyes as the ground neared. "I can look. I'm sure I need to do this, but I'm scared that I don't know what I've gotten myself into. I would say this is the ultimate experiment, with a potentially fatal cost, and I'm scared of what the results will be." Description: Luthor was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Ash. I haven't forgotten about the scar I left on your hand. I don't know what's going to happen to me after I die, but I'll try my best to make it back to you. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. But High Mage Valdor is right. This world is not made for me." System message: Luthor is waiting. "This is it. I wonder what will happen after you die. I hope I get to save you with turn back time. I hope we both get to speak to the time manipulator finally. Regardless of what happens though, I'm here for you, Luthor." One of two Don't think like that, Luthor. This world will be sad without you. I know you want to die, but I think it's a huge risk. Chronos could be trying to trick you. At least live long enough to say goodbye to your family before you die, Luthor. 2 of 2. Magic has alert. Response change.
What the?
Magic okay button. This is it. Magic has changed your message to be read and say, "This world is not good enough for you, but this is it. Magic has alert. Okay button. Magic has changed your message to be read and say, "This world is not good enough for you," button.
Why?
Changed your message. Response. Description: Luthor received the message, "This world is not good enough for you." Description: Luthor's eyes widened. Chronos. Description: Luthor is dead. System message: turn back time. Descriptive: turn back time. The response chambers: turn back time.
And we turn back
The
time.
response. Red message: first comes curiosity. Red message: second comes desire. Red message: third, I hope you weren't expecting another poem.
Okay.
Red message: it's time we spoke. Red message: my name is Alvin Timecrest. Red message: but this shouldn't come as a surprise to someone who has seen Ezra's memories. Red message: talk to you soon. System. Red message: talk to you soon. Smiley face emoji. 7 hours. Skip timer for 1 skip. Skip timer for 1 skip. Chris. Chapter 13. Messages. 440 gold. Timecrest. Oh, iPhone.
All right.
Characters.
So that is chapter 12. Very... not a very good way to end this. Not a very good way to end this at all. Nope. Not a good way to end that at all. No. But not much I can do there. So, okay, here's what's going to happen next in the next chapter, I believe. So, Luthor is going to be basically shown what his life would be like without Alvin, essentially. Now, here's my question. Is Chronos and Luthor the same person in Timecrest 1 and 2, or is it actually Alvin who's been No, it's not, because is it that way? I don't know. There's a lot of questions that have not been answered. So, anyway, that's it for today's video. So that's it for today's video. If you guys have any more questions, please put them down in the comments below, or you may send them to info@TheTechPianoPlayerKid.com. You can also give me a text at 913-312-1325. And if you do not live in the United States, you can text me through WhatsApp and give me a call there as well. I also have a toll-free number that you can use to give me a call at 877-318-8775. Please also follow me and like my Facebook page, The Tech Piano Player Kid, and follow me on Twitter, tech_piano. And you can also join my discussion forum on my website where you can ask questions about technology and help to answer questions about technology for the blind and stuff like this by going to TheTechPianoPlayerKid.com and clicking on the discussion board page underneath the navigation bar menu where you can register for a free account and help to answer questions and ask questions if need to be. Please make sure that you get permission from your parents if you still need to do so before making an account, just to make sure that you're on the safe side and that you don't want to get in trouble because we don't want that to happen. And you can also subscribe to my monthly newsletter if you wish by going to my website, TheTechPianoPlayerKid.com. Again, if need to be, get permission from your parents just to be on the safe side. And you can unsubscribe at any time if you wish. And if you have any trouble with unsubscribing or creating an account or deleting your account, please let me know and I will do my best to help you out. Anyway, that's it for today's video. God bless you all and peace. The Tech Piano Player Kid is out. Thank you for watching today's video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications and leave a comment down below. For questions, please send an email to info@thetechpianoplayerkid.com. You can also give a call or text at 913-312-1325. And don't forget to like my Facebook page, The Tech Piano Player Kid, and follow me on Twitter, tech_piano. Black background with white text that reads The Tech Piano Player Kid displays on the screen with the same text written to the right in Braille, then fades to black.